The story begins with an army standing at the northern border of the kingdom of Krasis. The army is led by Duke Elion, who is the lord of the northern border. But something strange is happening, because Elion is deeply shaken and frightened when he sees an army of undead approaching them. The main problem is that the number of dead is beyond imagination. And what's more, the army of the undead is advancing, along with a terrifying poisonous fog. A soldier standing next to Elion notices something and asks him to look there. Elion shudders when he discovers that the Death Knight Durin is marching alongside the undead army. Durand is an undead who is said to be capable of easily killing even 10 high-ranking knights in battle. The soldier next to Elion is terrified, believing that they will not be able to defeat such an overwhelming force. Therefore, he suggests that Elion retreat and prepare for a siege. Elion is also very frightened, but he knows that retreat is not an option, as the northern wall has already fallen. If the city gates fall, their nation will come to an end. No matter what the cost, they must hold them back today. But suddenly, someone walks past Elion and heads straight for the undead army. Seeing this, Elion shouts at the man who is so recklessly rushing into battle. The soldier informs him that it is Lord Iren Rox, sent to the battlefield by the Southern Marquis Rox. This is the protagonist, Iren Rox, a very strong warrior, the very one who fights with daggers, even right now. However, Elion believes that Iren will not be able to defeat Duran, but to their great surprise, the impossible happened, and Iren defeats Durin with his dagger, killing him for good. Elion and the soldiers are shocked that Duran was defeated so easily. They consider it impossible, given the rumors of Duran's incredible strength, but it happens right before their eyes. Then Irene throws her daggers at the rest of the undead, destroying them with a single blow, literally melting them before their eyes. Seeing this, Elion and the others wonder if Irene is a saint sent from heaven, but Irene himself believes that he is not like a saint at all. Suddenly, a pop-up window appears in front of him, informing him that he has gained experience, and that his Mountain of Firebones skill has reached level 1. This is a skill capable of melting even the bone marrow of the undead. The technique of absorbing 10,000 poisons absorbed the toxin, and his skills increased. Irene thinks to himself that he is not a saint because he will take whatever he finds useful, and the scene changed abruptly. It all started 6 months ago, when Urin suddenly woke up in bed, wondering where he was because the place was unfamiliar. The moment he woke up, the maid entered, and he looked at her in surprise because she was very beautiful. But he couldn't understand why she was dressed in such strange clothes and why she had a sword hanging from her belt. The white-haired maid asked the boy if he was all right. Although he looked healthy, she decided to call the priest immediately. The boy tried to stop her quickly because he wanted to ask her something important, but she did not listen and simply left. After that, he struggled to his feet, wondering where he was, but when he turned his gaze slightly to the right, he was shocked when he saw himself in the mirror. He realized that this was not his body. He wondered where his real body, that of an attractive middle-aged man, was. The boy, or rather the man inside him, began to cry, asking why he looked like a chubby child. He was frightened and upset, wondering if it was a dream, as he couldn't understand anything. He decided that if he just went back to sleep, he would wake up in his real body. Suddenly, the priest returned with other people, including a dark-haired old man who seemed to know the boy. The priest examined him while the dark-haired man looked at him angrily and then flashed his red eyes, calling the boy a disgrace to his family. The boy was terrified, not understanding who this man was. The priest laughed and told the dark-haired man to punish the boy later, as he had just woken up. The man calmed down a little, and the priest finished his examination, expressing surprise that the boy was fine despite having fainted. He noted that the boy was not seriously injured. His mind seemed stable, and most of his wounds had already healed. The boy replied that this was a relief, but this only angered the dark-haired man even more. He said it would have been better if the boy had died, because he had attacked his own bride. The boy was in shock, as he had no idea what was going on. The dark-haired man told him to behave like an adult, since he was already 19 years old. It seemed that this was the boy's father, and he continued to scold him, saying that even his younger brother had already awakened his aura, while he himself was just getting fatter by the day. The boy was stunned to hear the words about the aura. His father continued, saying that as soon as he was fully recovered, he needed to go apologize to his fiancée, Elia, and warned him that his future would be over if she refused to forgive him. Then, in a heavy voice, his father asked if he understood, and Urin instinctively replied fearfully that he did. Before leaving, his father tells him not to disgrace their family name anymore. The boy's name is Urin. His eyes widen, and he finally realizes the situation when he hears that he is Urin Rocks. He realizes that the man in front of him is none other than Urin's father, Marquis Willington Rocks. In shock, he points his finger at his new father and calls him by his full name. Hearing this, his father flies into a rage and slaps Urin because he dared to call his father by name right to his face. Urin falls to the floor, having been slapped right across the face. The priest and another man stop the Marquis, asking him to calm down. Meanwhile, the father yells at his son, calling him a monster. Meanwhile, Urin is very surprised and silently prays that this is a dream, then looks at the surroundings and loses consciousness. The next moment, he wakes up again, shocked to find himself in the same place as before. He begins to get nervous, wondering why he didn't wake up from what he thought was a dream. The white-haired girl asks if he is awake, but Urin is in deep shock and suddenly asks if she is Erin. She firmly confirms her identity, which makes Urin even more shocked and upset. He then continues by asking if he is lying in bed after losing consciousness because he chased after Ilya, was beaten up, and fainted. The girl hung her head and said that was not quite the case. Erin is surprised and asks why Urin has suddenly become so polite and formal. Her reaction frightens him even more, and he continues to ask if Ilya knocked him out. Erin confirms that he attacked Ilya in the room and that she beat him unconscious until he passed out. Urin realizes that he is now in a very bad situation. Erin doesn't understand why he looks so upset, but Urin believes he is completely doomed. It becomes clear to him that somehow he ended up inside the web novel he wrote himself, but not as the main character, but as a trashy villain who picks fights with the hero and dies pitifully in the end. Urin is not at all happy with this state of affairs. He clutches his head, thinking about how he ended up in a world that is no longer just a webtoon. Erin doesn't understand his behavior, but Urin starts to cry, realizing that the creator of this webtoon has taken over Urin Rocks' body. Now the girl is even more confused. What is a webtoon anyway? Simply put, Urin Rocks is a complete scoundrel who has no talent, no skills, and who never trains. He parasitizes on his family name as an heir, eventually loses his fiancée, who leaves him for the main character and in anger attacks the protagonist, but instead ends up beaten up and dies miserably in some alley. He's just trash. Urin is terrified, worrying about how he will survive in such an uncertain world. It's a fantasy world, but he has no idea what Urin's abilities are. However, he at least knows about the possibilities and items that the main character has not yet discovered. Thinking about this, Urin quickly begins to plan what preparations he needs to make. When he tries to stand up, he feels that his new body is incredibly heavy and falls to the floor. Erin runs closer, asking if he is okay, but he replies that he is not okay at all. Suddenly, while Erin is telling him to rest more, he sees something unusual. At first, he couldn't see it clearly because he was frowning, but now he notices something very bright and eye-catching. It was a character window next to Erin, showing her abilities. Her traits include Quick Sword Level 2, Clear Mind Level 1, and Aura Disposition also Level 1, but her affection rating is at 0. Urin studies the stats panel, which makes Erin suspicious, and she asks what he is doing. Nervously, he says he just lost his mind for a moment, and insists that she leave because he is fine now. Erin obeys his order and heads for the door to leave the room, while Urin continues to silently read and ponder her stats. Seeing her characteristics window, Urin recalls that Erin was always intended to be stronger and more talented than ordinary knights. But what he doesn't understand is her affection rating. Reading this, he wonders if this world contains elements of a dating simulator. He thinks this might be the case because he used to play dating simulators a lot. After Erin leaves, Urin feels relieved that her affection stat is at least not negative, given Urin's usual behavior, but he knows that it's still a problem. Saying this to himself, he turns abruptly and looks in the mirror and sees Urin's fat body staring back at him. Yeah, not so good. And now his face expressed only rage at the sight. Suddenly, his own character window appears, showing information such as his special condition, morbid obesity. His traits include the Eye of the Creator, level 1, and the 4 Arts of Heavenly Poisons, although the latter is currently blocked with a synchronization level of 99.9%. Among his skills, Urin believes that only one really stands out: the 4 Arts of Heavenly Poisons. Thinking about this, Urin recalls that this skill is taken from a webtoon he loved to read. It was a webtoon featuring a powerful heroine, and the 4 Arts of Heavenly Poisons were a martial art of poisons and hidden weapons. Urin realizes that the lore of this new world is a strange mishmash, but he also believes that if he can actually learn the 4 Arts of Heavenly Poisons, it could be his ticket to survival. The scene shifts to the clan, which often appears in Chinese wuxia novels, a prestigious sect from Sichuan province, specializing in poisoning and silent killings, using hidden weapons soaked in toxins. And right now, Urin also has this skill, but it is blocked. Looking at the character panel, he wonders why such a skill exists in a completely different world of the novel, since it should be a medieval setting. Despite this, the most important question for Urin is whether he will be able to unlock this ability. The mere thought of it makes him laugh joyfully. Then the scene switches to the main marquee. He is distracted because someone is suddenly calling him. It was Aaron, who entered the marquis's room. There, the marquis asks her if his son is awake. Urin confirms that he woke up a while ago. Then he asks about Urin's condition, and she reports that he doesn't seem normal because he stumbled when he tried to get up, and his body is still in poor condition. The marquis finds this hard to believe, as even the priest said that Urin's wounds were not very deep. He then asks if she noticed anything strange, because normally, if he had told Urin to apologize to Ilya, Urin would have thrown a tantrum. But this time, Urin surprisingly agreed to apologize without saying anything. Not only that, but the marquis also notices a change in Urin's personality. However, he believes that Urin cannot truly change, and will simply return to his usual behavior the next day. Hearing this, Aaron assures him that Urin will definitely get better step by step. This frightens the marquis, and he immediately turns to look at Aaron, which makes her nervous. He is shocked to realize that even he, as Urin's father, has already given up on him. But Aaron still believes in Urin. With an awkward laugh, the marquis admits that he almost feels sorry for her, saying that she should have just been allowed to live her life as a knight. The marquis looks concerned, thinking about how hard it must be for Aaron to serve Urin. But Aaron insists that this is not the case, because today Urin felt somehow different than before, although she finds it difficult to explain. The next morning, Aaron goes to wake Urin and is shocked when he says he wants to start training. She can't believe her ears. Then, Urin asks her to take him to the parade ground so he can start training there. Stunned that Urin has never said anything like this before, Aaron asks him if he really wants to train right now. Without hesitation, he replies yes, asking if there is a problem. The Creator's Eye trait seems to allow Urin to see characteristics, but when it comes to unlocking the ability of the Sichuan Tang clan, he has no idea how to do it. He wonders if it could be because of his obesity, so he decides to start exercising while figuring out how to unlock it. Aaron and Urin start walking towards the parade ground. Looking at the mansion's garden, Urin thinks that its size is equal to several stadiums combined, and just walking through it tires him out. But if he doesn't move, the fat will suffocate him in bed. During their walk, they pass several maids, and when they greet him, Urin notices that every servant he meets feels hostility toward him. It becomes clear that they all hate him. He sees it in every window, near every servant. At first, he does not understand the reason for such fierce hatred, but considering how terrible old Urin was, he cannot blame them. After some time, Urin, exhausted, asks Aaron how long it will take to get to the parade ground. Aaron replies that they will arrive soon, and points to the third training hall. explaining that the first and second are mainly used by knights. They enter the training hall, where Urim notices that someone is already inside. He immediately checks his stats window and is shocked to see that this person has a desire to kill him. This terrifies Urim. The person's name is Rekka Alian. His trait is level 1 fast sword, and his affection for Urim is -91. Rekka looks at Urim and speaks, asking him the reason for his sudden visit to the training hall. Completely terrified, Urim shouts Rekka's name, which makes Rekka smile. He says that he is honored that Urim still remembers him. Trembling, Urim points to his sword and stammers that of course he remembers, and then quickly whispers to Eren, asking if something happened between him and Rekka. While Rekka resumes training, Eren asks Urim if he really doesn't remember. Urim nervously replies that he doesn't remember at all. Eren still doesn't believe that he doesn't remember. Then Eren tells him that a few years ago, when Urim's father forced him to train, he called Rekka, who had just joined as an intern at the time, and Urim laughed and cut his face with a sword. After that, the Marquis gave up trying to make Urim train. Urim is shocked to hear this, and looks at Reku, who is still training, but looks back at him with fierce eyes, making Urim tremble. He realizes how hopeless and shameful the real Urim was. Realizing the danger of the situation, Urim decides to leave, or rather run away, while Rekka silently watches them leave. Once outside the training hall, Urim asks Eren if there is another place where he can train alone. Hearing this, Eren tells him about the 4th training hall, but explains that it is very far away and the conditions there are poor. In other words, it is just an empty field. Hearing this, Urim is very happy and decides to turn around, telling Eren that they will go there, declaring that he will lose weight properly. Eren is surprised and points the way, telling him to follow her. After a while, they reach the 4th training hall, but Urim is already exhausted. Catching his breath, he looks at the various types of weapons, thinking about the Sichuan Tang clan, which specialized in throwing knives and small weapons. Thinking about this with a rather silly look on his face, Urim picks up a dagger to try throwing it at a target. And now he was standing with the dagger in front of 3 targets. Now there were only the 2 of them left, the main character with a dagger and the target in front of him. After examining it and preparing himself, he uses all his strength to throw the dagger, and it seemed as if he had even charged it with his aura, but it didn't even reach the target and fell to the ground halfway. He hoped that this would unlock his skill, but it still didn't happen. After that, he notices that Eren is watching him and quickly assures her that he just threw it once for fun. He laughs nervously and says he knows he needs to develop his basic endurance first. Having decided this, he starts running laps around the hall. He also tells her that he will train on his own. Eren is struck by the sudden change in Urim's behavior when he begins training his basic endurance. Gigi says that she is free to train however she likes, and continues running. After that, he continues training, looking very tired, although he only ran a couple of meters. Later, Eren reports everything to the Marquis, which greatly surprises him. Urim really did come to the training ground and started training. The Marquis finds this very strange, wondering how long it will last. Soon, 3 weeks pass, and the Marquis is shocked that Urim has not missed a single training session. Looking out the window, the Marquis also notices that Urim has lost a lot of weight, which has noticeably changed his appearance. The Marquis begins to feel proud of his son, because now that he is not overweight, his face looks very handsome. However, he is still concerned about whether Urim has truly matured or not. Later, at sunset, Urim looks at himself in the mirror in his room, thinking about how much he has slimmed down. But the real problem is that the Sichuan Tang clan's trait still refuses to unlock. After that, Urim gets dressed and decides to give it another month. If it still doesn't unlock, he plans to steal the fate-changing mint intended for the protagonist. Right after he gets dressed, Eren comes in with dinner, and he thanks her. The dinner she brought was chirin soup. Despite its crude name, it is a nutritious dish for endurance, very effective for burning fat and building muscle. The Rox family eats it after every workout. But Urim doesn't like this soup at all, and he feels doomed when he sees it again. Seeing the look on his face, Eren asks if he is tired of it. Urim instantly replies that he is, because he has been eating only this soup for 3 weeks straight. Hearing this, Aaron asks him if he just wants to lose weight or if he really wants to become a knight, pressing him on his true desire. Urien gives her a thumbs up, saying he wants to be a knight. Aaron then explains that in this area, even the King Marquis eats Chiron soup after training, so Urien should stop complaining and eat his soup. Urien feels threatened and immediately agrees, thinking that life is a lifelong learning process, even if it seems like an outdated custom. After that, Aaron leaves the room, and Urien looks at the soup, deciding to put up with it for now, as it has helped him lose weight. He takes a spoonful of soup and tries it, trying to swallow it quickly, but suddenly feels something strange, as the taste seems slightly different. Then a pop-up window appears, notifying him that he has ingested poison. Urien is shocked, and the pop-up screen changes, showing that he has fulfilled the unlock condition for the Sichuan Tang clan trait. Now it is unlocked. Seeing this, Urien is completely amazed. Why was he able to unlock the Sichuan Tang clan skill just by taking the poison? Meanwhile, the Marquis, genuinely amazed by the noticeable changes in his son's behavior and appearance of his son, watches him from the window. But someone suddenly knocks on the door, and upon hearing this, the Marquis gives permission to enter the room. It is actually the Marquis's wife who has brought them tea. She is his second wife, and her name is Kenna. She smiles and asks what the Marquis was looking at so intently. The Marquis lies, saying that he was simply admiring how beautiful the garden looks. Kenna puts the tray of food on the table, then comes closer, smiling, and says that she personally took great care of the garden. The Marquis smiles again, praising her skills. Then she hugs him from behind and asks when he will choose Colin as his heir, as he mentioned earlier. She wants him to announce it sooner, since it has already been decided. His wife hugs him tighter, practically pressing her whole body against him to get him to make this decision. Hearing this, the Marquis tells her that it may take a little longer. Her mood instantly changes, and she argues with him, reminding him that he promised to name Colin as heir within this month. The Marquis confirms that he said this before, but explains that the situation has changed a bit. He tells her that she has probably already heard that Urien has finally come to his senses, and that he is also the eldest son of the Rox family. The Marquis believes that if Urien really makes an effort, he may prove to be a worthy successor. Kenna agrees, saying she has heard the same thing. She smiles, admitting that she was so worried. But fortunately, it seems that Urien has finally sobered up. She continues, saying that it must be a relief for the Marquis as well. He turns around and agrees with her, admitting that he never thought Urien would finally come to his senses after being hit by his fiancée. Kenna presses him again, asking when he will decide on a successor. The Marquis explains that Urien only started training 3 weeks ago, so it's better to watch him a little longer. However, he promises Kenna that if Urien reverts to his old ways, he will immediately transfer the title of heir to Colin, who is their son. Hearing this, Kenna turns to leave, telling the Marquis that she will go to the bedroom first so that he can finish his work and come quickly. And she leaves the room. After closing the door, her expression changes completely, showing anger and hatred towards Urien. The scene then switches to Urien, who looks at the panel showing that the feature is finally unlocked. He is shocked to realize that the Sichuan Tang clan specializes in poisons, and the condition for unlocking it was to accept the poison. Urien looks at his soup with curiosity and opens the characteristics window to get information about it. He notices a down arrow icon, indicating that there is more information below. When he scrolls down, the pop-up window updates to show the ingredients. Among them is Hanyang grass, whose attribute is paralysis. It is essentially a medicinal plant, but it contains a weak toxin. It is harmless to adults in small amounts, but if it accumulates, it slowly paralyzes the body until death. Urien is delighted that the system displays this information. Aaron, however, thinks he is just acting strange, as she cannot see the characteristics window. She looks at the soup and notices that he is not eating it. Hearing this, Urien quickly starts eating the soup. As he eats, he thinks about who could have put poison in his food. Usually, no one kills Urien with poison, so he believes that something has changed in the course of events. Now that he thinks about it, what should have already happened did not happen. In the original story, this was around the time when Colin, the second son, was to be officially named heir. Urien wonders why this has not yet happened, The only reason he can think of is that his sudden training has delayed the decision, which means that whoever put poison in his food must be on that side. Urin chews happily until another pop-up window appears, showing that the condition for unlocking the weak, paralyzing poison has been met. Finishing his meal, he tells Eren that he has eaten everything, crying and saying that it was so delicious that it brought him to tears. Eren doesn't understand at all and just looks at him nervously. But Urin tells her to leave because he wants to be alone. She takes the plates and leaves, telling him to rest. Urin waves to her, wishing her a good night, then stares intently into the mirror and shouts for the characteristics window to appear. The characteristics window now shows that the Sichuan Tang Clan trait has been unlocked. Just like in a VR game, Urin decides to focus on the plus button to open the details page. It shows that he has unlocked 3 skills: poison, hidden weapons, and martial arts. However, the other skills remain locked. He then focuses on the plus button for poison to see more details. It shows that leveling up requires special conditions, with different poisons available depending on the user's level. Urin scrolls to the bottom to see the last available poison. Seeing this, he concludes that he must first unlock all the lower levels. In other words, it is a level-up unlock system. To obtain the most basic poison, a weak paralyzing poison, Urin needs an internal technique. This seems logical to him, as the Sichuan technique uses internal energy to control the poison. After that, Urin decides to check the second skill, martial arts. And there he sees a menu for selecting a basic internal technique: the art of dark poison, the art of thunder needles, and the divine energy of 10,000 poisons. A warning is also displayed, stating that Urin can only choose one internal technique. Urin laughs happily, saying that it's an easy choice since he's a fan of all of them. The art of dark poison focuses on poison. The art of thunder needle focuses on hidden weapons. And the divine energy of 10,000 poisons takes more time to master, but allows one to achieve mastery in both poisons and hidden weapons. The more, the better, he thinks. Protagonists are always like that. Therefore, Urin decides to choose the divine energy of 10,000 poisons. After making his choice, Urin's hair begins to fly, and his whole body glows. He is shocked because the mantras of the technique are imprinted directly into his mind. With the mantras fully imprinted, Urin decides to try circulating the energy right away. He takes off his shirt. Phew, how interesting, and sits down on the bed to concentrate. Once focused, he feels a strange flow moving through his entire body. Qi. Then he directs it through the correct meridians and stores it in his dantian to create internal power. But the next day comes abruptly. Urin is still training, concentrating on the circulation of qi. He finds it amazing, realizing that martial arts novels weren't lying about training all night without sleep. It feels real, as he doesn't feel tired at all. In fact, his body has changed, and he feels full of energy. He can even feel the flow of qi around him. Not only that, he can tell how many birds are outside the window without even looking. Urin also feels a dense, warm energy in his dantian. And now, if he directs his qi to his head, he can open the characteristics window without needing a mirror. The characteristics window shows that the 10,000 poisons divine energy is at 1 star. In other words, only 10% of it has been awakened. Suddenly, Urin senses a familiar aura outside the door and looks in that direction. It turns out to be Eren, who has come to wake him up. She sees him sitting on the bed, concentrating, and asks if he was asleep, as his bed looks untouched. Urin laughs, saying that it just happened that way, but Eren insists that it's not good and tells him to rest today. She is about to leave the room, but he stops her, saying that he will train today because he feels great and is in top shape. She turns around, agrees with him, and says she will make breakfast first. After that, she closes the door and stands behind it for a long time, wondering when Urin had managed to gain muscle mass. After a while, they reach the 4th training room, where Urin approaches the weapons again, looks at all the daggers for a long time, and realizes that the time has come. He takes a dagger to test his new skills. Now he stood in front of the target again with the dagger in his hands, and as soon as he focused his gaze on the target, something surprised him greatly. He couldn't believe his eyes, but he is shocked to see the crosshairs of the sight before his eyes, as if in a first-person shooter game. He can aim at targets. With their help, Urim could aim accurately at the target. The guy swung. Eren looks at him doubtfully, her expression clearly saying that Urim won't be able to hit the target, just like last time. Urim throws the dagger, and now his purple aura is definitely activated. And this time, he hits the target cleanly. Overjoyed, Urim celebrates, while Eren watches in amazement. He has finally unlocked the hidden weapon skill of the Sichuan Tang clan. She becomes very curious and asks Urim what he just did. Urim replies that he doesn't know himself, and tells her that he can only assume that it is the result of his training over the past month beginning to show. Eren seems very surprised, because no one can achieve something like this in such a short time. This makes Urim realize that it is the first time he has seen Eren so shocked. Urim smiles, deciding to try again. He grabs the dagger and aims it at the target. As he throws it, he watches his body and notices that fiery internal energy rising from his lower abdomen. And now he is ready for another strong and flawless throw. The dagger flies faster and stronger this time, hitting the target with ease and precision, and even breaking through the target's wooden shield. Eren is even more shocked, shouting at the broken shield in surprise. Urim smirks, because for him, the appearance of a crosshair from a shooter game in front of his eyes is essentially like using a cheat code. He can now easily throw wherever he wants and however he wants. No one can stop him. In his previous world, he played a shooter game called Battle Attack, and even won a tournament at the Yandongpo Internet Cafe. Completely shocked and surprised, Eren asks Urim what is going on. This prompts Urim to ask her if she senses anything unusual about him. She doesn't understand the question, and simply says that, apart from the fact that he has lost quite a bit of weight since yesterday, she doesn't notice any other changes. Urim asks if he really has lost weight, and Eren confirms this. She explains that since he has been training every day and eating chirin soup, he has been steadily losing weight. But today he looks completely different, and it is even more noticeable. Urim agrees with her, now realizing that since Eren cannot feel the inner energy flowing through his body, it means that only he can use it, and no one else in the world can detect it. Smiling, Urim thinks that he has truly gained incredible power, a real gift. He smiles, grabs another dagger, and decides to continue practicing. Each throw easily hits the target. 10 out of 10 daggers hit the bullseye. This time, Urim aims at the same spot again, and his accuracy is perfect. The dagger sticks into the dagger. Eren is even more shocked. The main character rejoices in his new ability. Out of curiosity, Eren decides to try throwing a dagger herself. The protagonist is shocked, but still lets her try, and she is already standing and trying to aim. She throws with all her might, almost falling face down on the floor, but misses the target completely. The second one also shows that the girl is clearly terrible at throwing daggers. Seeing this, Urim laughs, saying that finally there is something Eren cannot do. Embarrassed, Eren blushes, but Urim suddenly notices a pop-up window. It says that he has unlocked Sekion Danga's memory trait, as well as the straight cut skill. This means that now he can not only throw faster and harder, but also use a memory-based projection with stones, wood, sculptures, iron swords, or any object, as if it were a memorized weapon. At this time, Eren was furious at her failure. Excited, Urim decides to test it out. He grabs a broken sword, but first tells Eren to step aside. Curious, Eren asks what he plans to do with it. She sees the broken wooden sword in his hands, which surprises and intrigues her. Urim raises the broken sword high, and the girl looks on in shock. Then he directs his internal energy from his dantian to his hands, then activates the straight cut skill and throws it. The sword flies powerfully, not only hitting the target, but also tearing the wooden shield to pieces. Eren is completely shocked and alarmed, asking Urim about the source of his sudden strength. Urim lies, telling her that he doesn't know himself, suggesting that it may just be the power of practice. Eren shouts that such a thing is simply impossible. Then Urim calmly tells her that he knows she reports everything to the Marquis, but asks her for a favor, to keep it a secret for now. His eyes stare intently into the girl's face. Eren hesitates, trying to deny that she is hiding anything, but Yurin insists, saying that he is testing a few things right now. He assures her that he will explain everything to the Marquis himself later, so she just needs to wait. Hearing this, Eren finally agrees not to tell the Marquis about the matter. Time passes, and the moment comes when the mansion's servants' shift ends and they head home. Among them is a red-haired man who first said goodbye to all his colleagues and then silently walks to his house with a bag on his shoulder. He walks slowly, probably unaware of what is about to happen. At this time, Yurin silently follows him and uses the Creator's Eye trait on him. The man's name is Peru, and his traits are Poisonous Touch and Agile Movement, both of the first level. This confirms to Yurin that Peru is the one who poisoned his soup. Determined, Yurin begins to follow him, finally deciding to test his newly unlocked skill. He points his finger at Peru, and immediately a huge yellow arrow appears in his vision, pointing at his target. And immediately, the main character activates a paralyzing poison. A snake immediately wraps itself around him, and his aura changes color to green, his fingers literally becoming the fangs of a poisonous, deadly snake. And the attack immediately flew inside at the man with the black bag. In an instant, the poison pierces the man's body. Peru suddenly feels a sharp pain. His body freezes, and he fell to the ground, unable to move. Yurin laughs as he approaches, pleased that the experiment was successful. And not only that, he also sees that the effect lasts for 1 hour. To begin the interrogation, Yurin drags Peru to a safe place. Later that night, somewhere, Peru opens his eyes, moaning in pain. Yurin stands in front of him with a lantern, asking if Peru is finally coming to his senses. He demands to know if Peru knows who he is. Peru is shocked to see Yurin. Yurin then threatens him, telling him to answer honestly if he wants to live, and asks him directly if he was the one who poisoned the soup. Yurin then sits down and tells Peru that he will ask him a few questions, and explains the rules. If the answer is yes, Peru must blink once, and if the answer is no, he must blink twice. First, Yurin asks if he understands, and Peru blinks once to confirm that he does. Then Yurin continues by asking whether it was Peru who poisoned his soup or not. Peru blinks once, admitting that he was indeed the culprit. Yurin continues, revealing that the poison used was the Hanyang herb. Peru is shocked to hear that Yurin knows about this, and blinks once in confirmation. A bead of sweat is already rolling down his face. Seeing this, Yurin moves on to the next question, his face contorted into a smile, asking if the person who ordered Yurin's poisoning was the wife of Marquis Kana. But Yurin is very surprised, looking ahead, because Peru blinks twice, which means it wasn't Kana. Yurin thinks he is lying, even though he ordered him to tell only the truth, and puts a dagger to Peru's neck. He says that one lie could cost him his life. He repeats the question, asking again if it was Kana, but Peru blinks twice again, insisting that it was someone else. It becomes clear that Kana was not the instigator, and therefore it is understandable that Peru does not seem to be lying. Yurin decides to put this aside for now. Then he hands Peru something, telling him to eat and swallow it, claiming that it is called delayed poison, shoving it into his mouth. Peru swallows it, beads of sweat still pouring down his face. And Yurin explains that from this moment on, he has exactly 1 month to live. And if he does not take the antidote that Yurin has before that time, Peru will die. After all the organs in his body will melt away. Peru is his hostage. Yurin threatens him, demanding that he obey his orders from now on. Frightened, Peru has no choice but to obey in order to survive. Seeing this, Yurin puts his hand on Peru's head to free him from the paralyzing poison. After being freed, Peru can finally speak again. Later, he is even able to stand before the main character. Yurin confirms this and immediately asks again about the person who ordered him to poison the soup. Peru reveals that it was not Kana, but Knight Captain Crux Livingston. Yurin is stunned to hear this. Peru continues, explaining that Crux ordered him to make sure Yurin died of illness within a year. Crux is Kana's older brother, who became Knight Captain thanks to her marriage to the Marquis. Yurin realizes that his deduction was not entirely wrong. Karax is indeed Kana's accomplice, but that is not the most important thing right now. Yurin then gives Peru a piece of paper. Peru reads it and is shocked to see that it contains a list of poisons. Few people know as much about poisons as he does, and Yurin explains that this means Peru can get them on the black market. Yurin orders him to use the money he received from Karax to buy all the poisons on the list. He also orders Peru to bring any poisons he already has by tomorrow evening. Shocked, Peru asks why Yurin needs these poisons. Yurin gets angry, demanding to know if he gave permission to ask questions. Frightened, Peru quickly obeys and shuts up. After that, Yurin turns around and orders him to leave. As Peru begins to leave, the main character stops him again. Yurin suddenly tells him that from now on, the soup must always be seasoned with a large amount of Hanyang herb. Peru is shocked, unable to believe that Yurin actually wants to be poisoned. The scene immediately changes. Returning to his room, Yurin laughs loudly, finding the situation amusing. He remarks that martial arts are very cool, and he never thought that Peru would actually fall for the delayed poison, which was really just a wad of dry leaves. Now Yurin knows that he must quickly master the martial arts of the Sichuan Tang clan. Because if history follows the plot he has written, a terrible event will soon occur in the outside world. The next day passes, and night falls. Finally, Peru arrives at Yurin's with the poisonous herbs he already has. Yurin examines them and names them one by one. The first is Hanyang grass, the second is Ukrapa grass, and the third is the leaf of the tree vein. Peru is shocked, wondering how Yurin learned about such rare poisons so easily. Yurin smirks, saying it's nothing. But the truth is that he can see everything clearly through the status window. Yurin then asks why Peru carries other herbs with him, because if he only intended to kill Yurin, Hanyang grass would have been enough. Hearing this, Peru explains that Hanyang herb takes a long time to work, and once resistance develops, the process takes longer than expected. But if Ukrapa is added after the symptoms of Hanyang begin, the effect will be stronger. Yurin understands that, in other words, when mixed, the poisons become more powerful and less noticeable. Curious, Yurin asks how Peru learned all this. Peru explains that when he was only 8 years old, he was sold to the Livington family and trained by their poison master. Yurin asks if there were many like him, and Peru explains that at first there were about 20 children, but soon they all died and only he survived. This makes sense to Yurin, as children with no connection to poison would not have lasted long around toxins. But it also makes it clear that Peru harbors a deep grudge against the Livington family. Yurin thinks to himself that he may have just found a very useful tool. He praises Peru, saying that he did a good job, and lets him go. Peru thanks Yurin and wishes him a good night before leaving. After that, Yurin decides to take the next step. He begins to eat poisonous herbs, one after another, even though he feels like vomiting. But today, he has already made his decision. After he forces himself to swallow them all, a status window pops up, warning that Yurin is in danger from the poison and must perform breathing meditation. Focusing, Yurin begins to meditate, determined to reach the second stage. The next morning dawns quickly, and Aaron first knocks on his door, and then opens the door to wake him up. But after looking inside the room, she is completely shocked, seeing that Yurin now has visible muscles on his body. He is sitting in the lotus position on the bed, and the girl asks in shock, "What's going on?" Yurin has moved on to the second stage, acquired the Little Dragon Step martial art, and also unlocked poisonous techniques, such as delayed toxin, truth serum, and soul-killing smoke. A pop-up window also shows that Yurin has acquired the martial art of Surin's footwork. Yurin opens his eyes upon hearing Erin's question about what is happening to him, and she is even more shocked when she smells the rotten stench coming from Yurin. Hearing this, Yurin stands up, while Erin looks like she is about to vomit. Yurin realizes that it is true that when internal energy increases and martial arts skills improve, the body expels a large amount of waste at once. Because of this, Yurin says he will open the windows, as the smell is very strong. Erin quickly tells him not to open the window, and instead to go take a bath immediately. Yurin decides to follow her advice, and later, after changing his clothes, he walks next to Eren, smiling inwardly at his success and practicing Surin's footwork, which is now at level 1. Eren uses it while walking. This footwork of the Tan family is ideal for quick movement, killing, and evasion. Eren still can't believe he is able to learn a skill that usually only appears in wuxia novels. As they walk, Eren happily copies the movements, but Eren suddenly notices this and asks why he is suddenly walking like a drunk, wondering if he is sick. Eren laughs nervously, assuring her that he is fine and telling her not to worry about him. He even tells her to relax her face a little. They continue walking, while Eren continues to perform what looks like a drunken dance. She asks again if he is really okay, and whether he really intends to train in the first training hall today, even though there are many knights there. Eren reassures her once more, saying that he is fine, and just wants to watch the other knights train, so she doesn't need to worry about him at all. Eren decides to believe him, and after a while, they reach the first training hall. There, Karox is practicing with his sword, while another knight swings a very heavy blade. Two other knights standing nearby notice Eren and begin to wonder who he is. They recognize Eren as Uren's butler, but do not recognize the young man behind her. They all wonder who he is, even doubting whether such a handsome guy could really belong to the Marquis family. Soon they realize that the rumors they have heard must be true. The young Lord Eren has lost a lot of weight thanks to his training. Shocked, they finally recognize him as the infamous Eren. The knights begin to whisper about him, but Eren is angry because he can clearly hear their words, thanks to his inner energy, even though they are whispering. Then Eren points out someone to Eren, telling him about an intern who trains hard with good technique. This person is a large, dark-skinned, muscular figure, and Eren remarks that he will probably soon become a junior knight. She explains that his movements are the basic stances of the Rox family sword style, and instructs Eren to watch closely. Eren sees the man and immediately recognizes him as Kraid, the main character of the novel and the protagonist's future ally. Eren never described Kraid's backstory in detail before the hero met him, so seeing Kraid here at the Marquis' house seems exciting. Eren thinks that this may prove to be a useful opportunity in the future. Then he looks at the other knights, all of whom harbor nothing but hatred for him. But today, Eren decides that they will serve as test subjects for his experiment. Right there, in front of Eren, Eren begins training, secretly planning to start by testing his prolonged poison skill on the pink-haired man. The pink-haired man suddenly feels very strange and fell to the ground, writhing in pain. Seeing this, the other two knights rushed to him, asking if he was okay. The brown-haired knight asked what was wrong with him, even inquiring if he needed to use the restroom, but the pink-haired man replied that that was not the case. He was in a lot of pain before he finally collapsed. Seeing this, the bald knight shouted that they needed to call a priest, but suddenly, the pink-haired knight stopped feeling pain and simply sat down on the ground without saying anything. Seeing him like this, the brown-haired man asked again what had happened now. The pink-haired man replied that the pain was gone. This angered the others because they thought he was just mocking them. The bald man scolded him, saying that he had already told him to go to the toilet when he needed to. While they were arguing and scolding him, Eren and Eren watched them silently. At that moment, Eren decided to try another skill, Soul-Killing Smoke, which was currently at level 1. This skill creates illusions that cause fear and confusion within a certain radius. Eren activated it right under the spot where the three knights were arguing. Instantly, the brown-haired man was shocked, his mind clouded, and he suddenly saw a monster in front of him and screamed. Eren shuddered with surprise and horror when she saw all three knights collapse to the ground, trembling with fear and shouting at each other to stay away. Eren was confused, wondering why they were behaving this way, while Eren watched with a satisfied look. In his illusions, the pink-haired man saw a monster ready to breathe fire at him. The brown-haired man was attacked by undead skeletons, and the bald man was also attacked by a monster. He even grabbed his weapon to fight back, but in the next moment, everything returned to normal for them. The three knights looked at each other in confusion, not understanding what had just happened. Eren decided to stop. They all explained that they had seen monsters attacking them. Satisfied, Eren also decided to end the experiment for the day, finding the results very impressive. Then he told Aaron that it was time for them to go back. Aaron was surprised and asked if they were really leaving already. Urin turned around with a happy face and said that the first training hall was too noisy, so they would just go to the fourth one. As they were heading there, a maid stopped Urin to inform him that a guest had arrived. Upon hearing this, Urin asked who the guest was. The maid hesitated for a long time, embarrassed and reluctant to speak, but finally broke the news to him that Ilya Marcus herself had come to see him. Urin was very surprised to hear that Ilya had come and begins to think about her, the girl who is good at fist fighting and has finally paid him a visit. Thinking about this, Urin remembers that around this time in the original story, Ilya began to demand that he break off their engagement, but at that time, he continued to refuse. Fat, pathetic pig. Reflecting on all this, Urin realizes that there is nothing he can do now and decides to meet with her. Then the scene shifts to a room where Ilya is standing by the window, looking out the window and telling herself that this time she will definitely break off the engagement. Finally, hearing some sounds behind her, she turns toward the door. Urin enters the door, asking if Ilya is there. Ilya is shocked when she sees this unfamiliar guy at the door. Urin greets her, asking if she is here, which frightens her even more. She nervously asks who he is. Urin, confused, tells her that he is Urin. Ilya is so shocked that she cries out loud, making Urin even more nervous, and he says that it seems like they haven't seen each other in a really long time. Ilya, still shaken, admits that she thought the rumors were false. Since only 2 months have passed, she asks how Urin could have changed so much. Urin replies that it's because he has been working hard. She is amazed to hear that Urin has actually made an effort. Urin continues, explaining that after she beat him up, he thought deeply about his life and ultimately came to the conclusion that he needed to change. Ilya points her finger at him, asking if he is trying to pick a fight for revenge, but Urin assures her that he would never do such a thing. Instead, he kneels down and tells her that he is very grateful. This greatly frightens the girl. Ilya is shocked, and Urin continues, saying that it was thanks to her that he was able to come to his senses. He expresses his true feelings, sincerely apologizing for what happened back then. Urin even suggests that if Ilya still wants to break off the engagement because of the incident, he will accept it as punishment. Ilya finds herself in a difficult position because she has never seen Urin behave this way before. She asks again who he really is. Urin replies that he is the former scoundrel Urin, and bows again to apologize. Ilya is even more shocked, but looks at him with great and undisguised curiosity. The protagonist thought that, although in reality it was not his fault, but the fault of the original owner of the body, the reason Urin is now seeking forgiveness to such an extent is simple, because of Ilya and her skills. They are truly extraordinary. She is not just an ordinary heroine. Her Queen of Swords trait is extremely strong, and in the future, it will only become stronger and stronger. Later, she will save the fallen protagonist and even defeat the main villain. All of this will be possible thanks to her Queen of Swords trait. That is why Urin believes that even if their engagement ends, it is better to restore their relationship and make her an ally. While he is thinking about this, Ilya suddenly tells him to stand up, surprising him. She asks if he is serious about what he just said. Urin stumbles, but confirms that he is serious and even promises it. Ilya does not accept this immediately, and instead demands that he swear, releasing her overwhelming aura. Feeling her suffocating aura, Urin thinks to himself that he never imagined Ilya's pressure would be so heavy, even though he had seen this scene before. Ilya orders him to swear that from now on, he will not live as he did before, and if he breaks this oath, she herself will teach him a lesson. These words shock Urin, because they are the very same lines that Ilya said to the protagonist in the original story. But now, she is saying them to him. Unable to breathe normally under the pressure of her aura, Urin decides to use his skill of 10,000 poisons, the divine art of Magneto, to resist her. Ilya is surprised that he is able to resist her aura, and demands an explanation. The fact that the main character was able to resist her surprised her greatly. Urin, maintaining a polite tone, addresses the girl, and swears that he will not live as he did before. It's as if they are in a romantic movie. Ilya blushes at his seriousness and attractiveness, and then finally backs down, agreeing to watch over him. She warns that if he makes even one mistake, the engagement will be unconditionally annulled. Yurin is stunned to realize that Ilya has decided not to break off the engagement. Later, the scene quickly changes. Ilya talks to the Marquis, who asks if she has met with Yurin. She confirms this. Then the Marquis asks if she has decided to break off the engagement. Ilya replies that yes, she has made a decision, and her decision was that she would not break it off. The Marquis is shocked and nervously asks why. He repeats the question again, because he really does not understand what could have changed the girl's mind. Ilya admits that she does not fully understand it herself. She explains that her father always told her that people cannot change. However, when she heard rumors that Yurin had changed, she became curious. She wondered if he had returned to being the weak but kind Yurin from her childhood. But the truth is different. She believes that he has not simply returned to his former self, but has become a completely different person. That is why she wants to give him a chance and trust him again. The Marquis is concerned, but also feels relieved. Ilya continues, saying that if Yurin ever becomes a scoundrel again, she will teach him a lesson with her own hands. The Marquis is frightened, but keeps his composure. Giving her a thumbs up, he asks her to take care of Yurin. Ilya nods, then stands up, saying that she will return now. Hearing this, the Marquis asks Ilya why she wants to leave immediately and tells her to stay at least a few days. This makes her anxious, and she confesses to the Marquis that she told her father she was going to break off the engagement, so staying longer would be awkward. The Marquis understands and suggests that she see Yurin before leaving, but she replies that she will not, as he is training, and she does not want to distract him. The Marquis appreciates her answer and asks her to give his regards to her father. Later that day, Yurin goes to see his father as he has been summoned. The Marquis looks out the window, and when he sees that Yurin has arrived, he turns around and pretends not to recognize him, asking who he is. Yurin is shocked, but then the Marquis bursts out laughing, saying it was a joke. He praises Yurin, acknowledging that he has indeed worked hard. Then the Marquis asks if Yurin knows the reason why he was summoned. Upon hearing this, Yurin asks if it is to begin his night training. The Marquis shudders at Yurin's response and turns around, praising him again, saying that he has also become quick-witted. The Marquis then laughs loudly and declares that in his opinion, the time has finally come for Yurin to learn the proud art of swordplay of the Rox family. But instead of stepping forward enthusiastically, Yurin raises his hand and calmly addresses the Marquis, saying that he has something important to say regarding this very matter. The Marquis is extremely shocked when Yurin reveals his desire not to inherit the family art of swordplay, but instead to devote himself to the art of throwing. For a brief moment, silence hangs between them. Then, Yurin firmly and unwaveringly confirms that his decision is final. He wants to study the art of throwing instead of fencing. The Marquis, clearly angered, tells Yurin that such an action is unacceptable, dismissing it as nothing more than a cheap trick used by thieves. He goes on to argue that with such a crude skill as dagger throwing, Yurin will not be able to defeat even a knight, let alone a low-level monster such as Borak. Unperturbed, Yurin responded to the Marquis' words with confidence. He proposed a bet. Could he defeat Borak with only a dagger? Hearing this, the Marquis finds Yurin's behavior very arrogant, considering it nothing more than useless stubbornness. The Marquis explained that a warrior's blade requires an aura to destroy Borak's scales, and that is why, in his opinion, even if Yurin practiced these throwing arts for 100 years, he would never be able to pierce Borak's scales. Instead of arguing back, Yurin smiles and tells the Marquis that in that case, the Marquis, his father, will win hands down. So he should just make a bet. The Marquis is shocked by his confidence and points at Yurin, calling him reckless, but in the end agrees, deciding to use this as a chance to break Yurin's stubbornness for good. After that, the Marquis asks what Yurin will bet. Yurin says that if he wins, he wants to control his own training from now on, but if he loses, he will obey the Marquis's will. Both agreed to the terms, and Yurin returns to his room as night falls. In his room, Yurin stands next to his bed, clenching his fist. He realizes that Eren has not reported his training to the Marquis, so tomorrow, he will finally be able to take the practical test. Urim becomes very curious about how many attempts it will take him to break through Borak's scales. Just in case, he decides to eat some of the poisonous herbs he has hidden away tonight and raise the divine art of Magneto 10,000 poisons to the 3rd star. While he is thinking, Aaron knocks on the door and enters. Urim looks at her as she explains that she has come to deliver a message from the Marquis. The time of tomorrow's bet is 12 o'clock, and the place is the first training hall. Urim looks at her curiously and asks if she knows the details of the bet. Aaron says that not only does she know, but the entire Marquis' estate knows about it. And thanks to this, the estate is now shaking with laughter. Urim is shocked to hear this. Aaron goes on to explain that everyone is joking about how young Lord Urim will wet his pants in fear when he sees Borak, or how he will simply run away. She tells Urim that people say such things because, at the moment, he is still considered an enemy of society. Urim is not happy with these remarks and looks upset, asking if these people will come to watch too. Aaron confirms that they will come, as the Marquis has not forbidden it. She is sure that the training hall will be packed. And the main character showed her the drama and price of popularity. Urim feels uneasy because the bet has suddenly turned into a spectacle. Then he asks Aaron's opinion about tomorrow's event. Aaron honestly tells him that he believes tomorrow will be Urim's day. Later that night, Urim raises the level of the divine art of Magneto 10,000 poisons to 3 stars. And the next day arrives. Fans and haters gathered here and shouted like soccer fans. Urim stands in the middle of the training hall, filled with a large and excited crowd, which makes him very nervous. The Marquis, sitting on his throne, calls Urim over and asks if he is ready. Urim nervously replies that he is, but complains about the large crowd of spectators. The Marquis explains that he was only going to inform his mage, but somehow the news spread everywhere. He warns Urim not to embarrass himself in front of so many people. The priest steps forward and begins to perform short-range summoning magic to start the duel. Urim is amazed, as he has never seen magic performed live before. A glowing circle surrounded by sparks of lightning appears before him. And then, finally, Borak appears. What surprises Urim even more is the opportunity to see the monster with his own eyes, which he, as an author, once created with only words. Borak is a 150-centimeter tall ocean monster. Even ordinary viewers find Borak repulsive, and Urim himself is surprised by its appearance. The truth is that he came up with Borak on the fly while eating sea bass sashimi at a restaurant when he couldn't come up with any other ideas for monsters. Urim even thinks that Borak could be a little cute if it weren't for his arms and legs. The next moment, Borak lunges at Urim, and the guy finally remembers that he needs to move too. But the guy easily dodges the monster's attacks, as if they were in the Matrix, causing the crowd and even the soldiers to fear for his safety. Some soldiers near the Marquis prepare to rush Borak, but the Marquis stops them. Meanwhile, Urim continues to dodge and thinks that Borak attacks without warning. Yet his speed is not that impressive. Urim decides to start his practical experiment by throwing a dagger to test how thick Borak's scales are. But when he squeezes the dagger and looks closely, he is surprised to see that Borak has a weak spot. Without hesitation, Urim decides to throw the dagger at the weak spot with all his might. He first aimed at the target itself, the monster's vulnerability. Then, with tremendous force, he threw his blade, filled with aura. The dagger flew at tremendous speed and hit its target. It hits accurately. The monster falls on its back. And while the main character looks at the fish, Borak, foaming at the mouth, dies instantly. Urim behaves nervously, stunned that Borak was killed with just one blow. The spectators are equally shocked, trying to comprehend what just happened. The Marquis himself is the most surprised of all. Soon the crowd erupts, cheering for Urim and calling him cool for defeating Borak with a single blow. The main character stood and watched happily, because he had finally managed to change people's opinion of him, at least a little. The Marquis immediately descends from his throne, points at Urim, and demands an explanation of how he was able to defeat Borak so easily. Urim simply smiles and says that he aimed well and hit the right spot. The Marquis, however, is not satisfied. He insists that he cannot accept this result, which surprises Urim. The Marquis claims that defeating Borak with just one dagger makes no sense. Urim hears this and teases him, saying that, of course, the great Marquis will not go back on his word. Meanwhile, the priest examines Borak and reports to the Marquis that the monster had no scales on his arm, which is where Urim's dagger struck. This convinces the Marquis that Urim's victory was nothing more than pure luck. Urim replies that whether it was luck or not, a bet is a bet. He turns to leave, but the Marquis stops him, telling him not to be so dismissive. Instead, he suggests doing it again. Urim calls the Marquis unreasonable, but the Marquis presses on and decides to add another promise to the bet. A stunned Urim listens as the Marquis announces that if Urim wins again, he will grant him one wish. But if Urim loses, he will begin training in swordplay, as they had originally planned. Urim is very happy to hear these terms, and asks if his father is really willing to grant his wish. The Marquis then informs Urim that this time, instead of fighting a Borak, he will have to fight a knight. After stating all the conditions, the Marquis asks Urim if he accepts the bet. Urim instantly replies that he accepts. He sees this as an excellent opportunity and looks around the stands, as it could be a chance to break the pride of Karax, the commander of the knights. That bastard, who was already blue in the face from the young prince's first victory. But Urim also thinks it's better to leave Karax alone so he can keep getting poison supplies through Peru. The Marquis continues, saying that an official knight would be too difficult an opponent for Urim, so he decides to pit a trainee knight against Urim, which would be fair. Hearing this, Urim realizes that everything is turning out very well and asks if he can choose the knight for the duel himself. Intrigued, the Marquis asks how he plans to choose. Urim says he wants to fight Cray. Creed runs out onto the field. Such a cool and muscular guy. The warrior bows to the Marquis and asks if his lord has summoned him. The Marquis praises Creed's training and says he wants Creed to do something for him. Hearing this, Creed declares that the Marquis can order him to do anything. Then the Marquis points to Urim and orders Creed to correct his bad habits. Creed looks at Urim with curiosity, and Urim waves at him in a friendly manner. Seeing this, Urim feigns shock, and the Marquis asks if Creed really can't do it. Creed straightens up and firmly says that he will do as ordered. Smiling, Urim tells Creed not to worry too much, promising that he will throw only 3 daggers, and if Creed blocks all 3, Urim will let him win. This greatly angers the Marquis, and he orders Creed to thoroughly punish Urim for his arrogance. Soon, Urim and Creed stand facing each other, ready for a duel. The knights cheer Creed on, urging him to win, and joke that if he loses, he will be left without food, laughing at the possible punishment. Suddenly, a woman's voice shouts words of support to Urim, wishing him luck. Hearing this, Urim is very pleased, and wonders if it really was a woman's voice. This single shout stirs up emotions inside Urim. Creed strengthens his stance and tells Urim that he is ready. Urim turns around, takes the dagger, and plans not to strike with full force on the first throw. But, to his surprise, he sees something interesting with his abilities. There were countless weak spots appearing on Creed's body, similar to those he had seen on Borak, but this time there were many more. Urim begins to worry, thinking that if he throws the dagger at one of these weak points, he might actually kill Creed. So he carefully aims and throws the dagger, not aiming for a fatal point. Even so, Creed is shocked by the force of Urim's attack, which turns out to be too overwhelming. He barely manages to block the blow. He even flew back a little, making sounds as if he had just saved the whole world. The knights are stunned to hear a sound like a cannon shot. Even the Marquis is shocked. His bet has failed again. Refusing to believe it, he examines the dagger and then goes to pick it up, finding it impossible that such an ordinary weapon could have such destructive power. Meanwhile, Creed trembles. His sword bears a mark from the dagger. Urim asks him not to relax, warning him not to let his guard down. Then, Urim tells him to get ready, because this time he will throw with full force. And the huge warrior continues to tremble from what seems to be an insignificant dagger. Urim thinks to himself that Creed is still the main character's right-hand man, so he won't die from this. The guy says he's going to attack. Then Urine throws another dagger at Creed with full force, and it seemed as if a meteorite was now flying towards the warrior. Creed gathers his professional strength and tries to block the dagger flying at him, but the impact creates a whirlwind of mist around him. All the spectators are in shock, including the stunned Marquis. Were surprised to see that the warrior was already on his knees, and Creed's sword had already shattered into pieces, leaving him trembling, until he finally drops the remains of his weapon. Seeing this, the Marquis rushes to Urine in shock, and says that they simply must talk in private as soon as possible. But Urine refuses, reminding him that the bet is not over yet. There is one dagger left. The Marquis is shocked, and tells Urine that this is enough. Instead of agreeing, Urine turns to Creed and asks him directly if he wants to end the duel like this. He tells Creed to raise his head and asks if he really wants to accept such a half-hearted result. Urine reminds him that, whether it be victory or defeat, it is the achievement of a clear conclusion that makes a night a night. He asks Creed again if he is ready to surrender. Hearing these words, Creed hesitates, but then, inspired by Urine's speech, decides to continue. He asks for a new sword. Suddenly, a blue light bursts from Creed, and he declares that he will not retreat. All the knights sat in shock and watched, and even the Marquis himself is stunned to see the trainee knight Creed awaken his aura right at that moment. Creed now stands upright, displaying his aura and taking a stance. Urine, however, is not surprised. He had already expected this. He knows that Creed's berserker trait only manifests itself when he reaches his limit. And now Urine thinks he will finally be able to test his advanced techniques on him. And now the battlefield was visible from above. Huge rays of blue aura stretched out from Creed. And Creed, standing in a fighting stance, tells Urine to throw the dagger. The Marquis looks very concerned about the situation, because no one expected such a huge amount of aura to manifest. It was at the level of a senior knight's talent. The Marquis wonders what Urine will do. Urine shows no hesitation when he sees Creed's aura. Instead of words, he grabs the dagger and throws it with even more force than before. But instead of flying straight, the dagger curves in an arc, as if going around a mountain. Seeing this, Creed thinks that Urine is just playing around, and at first frowns, trying to understand what this curved trajectory is. Then he increases his power to knock the dagger down, believing that this way he will be able to easily deflect it. But to his surprise, the dagger dodges Creed's sword. Both Creed and the Marquis are shocked. The dagger pierces Creed's shoulder, knocking him off his feet in pain. If you look through an X-ray, you can see that the sword went in deep, but didn't hit anything important. But it caused a great deal of pain. Creed began to scream in agony. Then he falls to his knees in front of the main character. All the knights watching are stunned. They whisper that Creed must be exaggerating because the dagger looked so slow. Some shout that he must be giving in to Urine simply because he is a young gentleman. Meanwhile, Urine analyzes the experiment, thinking that it worked better than expected. He realizes that he put more internal energy into the throw, which must have caused tremendous pain. Seeing this, the Marquis orders Urine to speak with him privately later and announces that Urine has won the bet. Urine smiles at this victory and then approaches Creed, who is writhing in pain. Urine abruptly places his hand on Creed's shoulder and heals him using internal energy absorption. Creed is shocked to feel the pain completely disappear. He gets up and thanks Urine. Urine replies that it's nothing, but Creed apologizes, admitting that when the dagger was flying slowly at first, he thought Urine was looking down on him. However, now he understands that this was not the case at all. Creed compliments Urine, saying that this technique was truly an exquisite divine technique. He adds that Urine could not have learned such a skill in such a short time. Therefore, he concludes that Urine must have been hiding his abilities. Urine is surprised, but Creed continues, asking if some secret organization has targeted the Marquis' family, and if that is why Urine has been hiding his power until now. Creed happily admits that he always found it strange that Urine seemed like an outcast. Hearing all this, Urine recalls that Creed is the type of person who loves conspiracy theories. He tells Urine to rely on him whenever he fights secret organizations in the future. To Urine's surprise, Cried's affection for him instantly increases to 26. Urin laughs nervously, saying he will, and tells Creed that they will meet later. Urin thinks to himself that berserkers really do have simple personalities. As Urin starts to leave, Creed shouts to everyone, urging them to believe him. That young Master Urin was never a scoundrel, and he swears to spread the word everywhere. Urin thinks it would be a good idea to stay close to Creed, who, as a berserker, will be able to single-handedly destroy the Night Order in the future. Then Urin approaches Eren, who is waiting with a towel in her hand. She praises him for his hard work. Urin thanks her and takes the towel. As they walk, Eren asks about the technique Urin used at the end, saying she has never seen it before. Urin replies that it is a new technique and asks what she thinks of it. Eren gives her honest opinion, saying that she has done some virtual sparring in her head, and if she had encountered this technique without having seen it before, she would have been defeated. But now that she has seen it once, she will be able to block it. Urin knows she is telling the truth, because one of her traits is clear mind, an extremely rare and powerful trait. They continue talking, and Urin mentions that Eren received nighttime education from a young age. He says that if she hadn't become his butler, she would probably already be a knight. He asks her if she is satisfied with the way things are. Eren, taken aback, asks why he is suddenly asking her such questions. Later that day, the Marquis is reviewing documents in his office when Urin arrives. Urin greets him, calling him Lord, and asks if he summoned him. This angers the Marquis, who tells Urin to call him Father when they are alone. As Urin continues to refuse, the Marquis says that his affection for him is fading. Urin does not understand the situation, as this has never happened before, but reluctantly agrees. The Marquis then asks about the technique Urin demonstrated yesterday. He says that even after searching through books, he could not find a throwing skill that uses such a clever movement. It has only been a month since Urin began training, and no matter how talented he is, it is impossible to develop such a technique on his own in such a short time. The Marquis's tone becomes harsher as he demands that Urin tell the truth about what really happened. Urin cannot reveal the real secret, but he has already prepared for this situation. He tells the Marquis a made-up story about finding a book. The Marquis immediately thought, "What book?" Gigi said he found it in the attic of the family library while looking for effective training methods. He explains that he tripped over a book left on the floor, fell onto the shelf, loudly cursing the person who left the book on the floor, and another book fell from the ceiling onto his head. Then he scratched his head and looked at the book that had hit him. This book had no title, only strange patterns carved into the cover. When Urin finally opened it without thinking twice, a light burst forth, and something absorbed itself into his head. After that, the book disappeared. So that's the story. The Marquis is shocked and says that the book must have been a magical volume of the Talmud. Urin smiles to himself because he already knows what magical tomes are. He himself had planted this knowledge. He remembers that in this world, great magicians write down techniques or spells in books, passing them on as magical tomes. Thanks to this, the Marquis believes the story. He explains that their library in the attic holds countless books collected by their ancestors, many of which are unknown even to him. He concludes that Urin was incredibly lucky to find this volume, and says with a smile that Urin has hit the jackpot. The main character immediately plays along. Then the Marquis stands up and says that a promise is a promise. He will no longer force Urin to learn fencing. According to an additional promise he made, he asks Urin to name what he wants. Urin also stands up and approaches his father, and then declares that he wants the title of heir. The Marquis is stunned to hear this, and immediately turns away. Urin assumes that if he says so, the Marquis will not fulfill his wish. Hearing this, the Marquis hesitates, but confirms that since it is within his power, he must grant Urin's wish. Urin intervenes, saying that the Marquis's expression looks too tense. The Marquis shudders upon hearing this, and Urin continues, saying that he will only cause trouble if he becomes the heir. Not only that, but many in the family will rebel, especially Kion, who will make a huge fuss. The Marquis realizes that Urin is right, and recalls Kion's behavior earlier. Because of all this, Urim says he will compromise for now. The Marquis asks if he really intends to compromise, then smiles and thanks Urim. Urim smiles back, because he is not really interested in the position of heir. If he became the heir, he would spend every day alone with the Marquis, learning how to manage the castle, a life without freedom. Instead, Urim would use his time to improve the Sichuan Tang family's poison skills and travel the world in search of opportunities. The Marquis tells Urim to name another wish. Urim replies that his other wish is to create his own order of knights. The Marquis is stunned to hear this. Urim continues, suggesting that Aaron, who is now his butler, and Cried, who dueled with him yesterday, become his knights. The Marquis replies that this is no more difficult than granting the title of heir, and even praises Aaron's exceptional talent, saying that he is too good to be wasted as a butler. In the end, the Marquis decides to grant Urim's wish. Hearing this, Urim thanks him, but the Marquis asks who will take Aaron's place as butler, since none of the current butlers are suitable. Urim informs him that he has someone in mind, Peru, who works in the kitchen. He suggests that the Marquis make Peru the butler, but asks that it be presented as the Marquis's decision, not Urim's. The Marquis finds this suspicious and asks what is going on. Urim replies that he will explain later. The Marquis readily agrees, which makes Urim feel that his father now trusts him more and no longer asks unnecessary questions. It turns out that the Marquis's affection for Urim has increased to 74 points, which is a huge increase. Urim concludes that being recognized as a son really does matter. Peru begins working as Urim's butler. Urim summons Aaron and Krita to the training ground and announces that they will become his exclusive knight order. He tells them to train hard every day from now on. He then introduces his new butler, Peru, but Aaron does not seem particularly pleased or happy. She recalls how she once asked Urim why he mentioned Peru as her replacement. Urim reveals that Peru is actually a spy, which frightens Aaron. She did not expect this turn of events at all. He explains that Peru was sent by the knight commanders Karox and Kaon to kill him. Aaron becomes concerned and asks why Urim keeps Peru close to him as a butler if this is true. Urim laughs and assures her that everything is fine because Peru now only listens to him. Aaron is truly shocked by these developments. Her thoughts are interrupted by Cried asking a question. Seeing this, Urim gives him permission to speak. Creed says that even though there are only 2 of them, since it is still a knightly order in name, there must be a senior knight, even if there is no commander. Then Cried looks at Aaron and says that the senior knight should be the strongest one, and she looks small and fragile. She is not fit to be the leader, so he should be the leader. Hearing this, Urim agrees and says that only a strong knight should become the senior knight, so he orders Cried and Aaron to fight right here and now. They begin sparring, and soon the outcome becomes clear. Aaron completely outclasses Cried, forcing him to admit defeat. She then instructs him, saying that his attack patterns are too simple and need improvement, otherwise his movements are too easy to read. Creed, visibly shaken, replies that he will remember this. Aaron sheathes his sword, and Urim announces that everything is fair now, and says that Aaron will be the leader of the Knight Order. He tells everyone to applaud. Then evening comes. Peru apologizes, saying he is going to prepare dinner. As he leaves the training hall, Urim watches him closely, able to faintly sense his energy even from a distance. Urim decides to try out a new technique, using his internal energy to create sound waves instead of his voice, transmitting words directly into the target's ears. This martial art, called sound transmission, is an essential skill in martial arts novels. Urim uses it and calls Peru by name. Hearing this, Peru turns around and responds, but freezes in fear because there is no one around. Urim calls his name again, which frightens him even more. He calls him again and again, from different directions. Urim asks why he looks so surprised. Calming down, Peru nervously asks if it is black magic. Urim corrects him, saying that it is more like connection magic. Peru is amazed and says that this is to be expected from Urim, who has never been affected by poison. He explains that he has heard of black magicians who control poison with magic, so he concludes that Urim must be such a person. Urim is amused by Peru's assumption and decides not to dissuade him, saying to believe whatever he wants. He then asks if the poison he requested earlier is ready. Peru confirms that the snake venom, an extract obtained from 100 poisonous snakes, is ready, although he admits that it was difficult to make. Murim praises Peru and instructs him to generously add the poison to the Tyrian soup that will be served for dinner. Peru, frightened, quickly accepts the order and quickly runs off to change his pants and underwear. Night falls, and the next day begins. Murim opens his eyes after training his inner energy. Since reaching 3 stars, his internal energy has not grown as quickly as he expected. He gets up, puts on his shirt, and thinks to himself that he doesn't know how much time is left before the global crisis. He concludes that he has no choice but to leave the Marquis's castle. The next day, Murim informs the Marquis, who is drinking tea in shock, that he is going to leave for a short time. The Marquis is surprised, because it is the first time Murim has ever left, and immediately asks if Murim plans to go to a town within the Marquis's territory. Murim confirms that he is, and the Marquis continues by asking how many days he plans to be away. Murim remains calm, secretly thinking that he will actually go much further, but there is no need to reveal this to the Marquis. So Murim tells him that he plans to be away for a week. Upon hearing this, the Marquis gives his permission, saying that Murim has been training hard, but then asks about his escort. Murim has already anticipated this and replies that he does not need an escort. The Marquis is shocked and scolds him, reminding him to remember his position as the eldest son of the Rock's family. Murim nervously replies that he is only going to a neighboring village, so there is no need for an escort. The Marquis scolds him again, warning him that he does not yet know how dangerous the world is. Even if Murim has become stronger through training, there is always the possibility that he could be poisoned. What the Marquis does not know is that poison no longer affects Murim. Since it is too difficult to convince the Marquis, Murim moves on to Plan B and pretends to agree, telling the Marquis that he will obey. Seeing this, the Marquis calms down and asks when Murim will leave. Murim replies that he will leave in 2 days. The Marquis nods and says he will prepare an escort for that day. Later, in his room, Murim admits to himself what he is really planning. He will not take any escort and will quietly leave tomorrow. During the day, Peru is shocked to hear from Murim that he has no money for the trip. Murim demands that Peru lend him money, since Peru has funds, which were provided by Karax to buy expensive poisons. Peru hesitates in shock, but Murim threatens him, asking if he wants to refuse the loan. Frightened, Peru quickly agrees and hands over the money. Murim then asks if Peru has it. Peru, confused, asks what he means, and Murim explains that he saw it last time when Peru was getting poisonous herbs. He discovered that Peru also has a spatial pocket. A spatial pocket is a common setting in fantasy novels. A mysterious pocket capable of holding up to a ton of cargo while looking very small. Peru hesitates again, but with no other choice, he lends it to Murim. Murim smiles and thanks him, saying that with the spatial pocket, he won't need to carry a bag. Then Murim remembers something, takes some grass out of his pocket, and gives it to Peru. It is actually a fake medicine, but Peru believes it is real. Murim instructs him that it is a month's supply of antidote for his poison. Peru is very happy to receive it, and Murim praises him for his good behavior, telling him to continue to be obedient. Murim promises that if he continues in the same vein, he will eventually give him the perfect antidote. Peru is overjoyed at this promise. The next day at dawn, Murim prepares to leave. He writes a letter and leaves it in his room before secretly leaving the castle. Walking through the grounds, he notices that there are very few people around at dawn. Suddenly, someone notices him and cheerfully asks why he is up so early. Murim shudders when he sees that it is just an old man who is simply trimming the bushes. Then he quickly plays along, confirming that this is indeed the case. Looking at the old man, Murim senses something unusual about him, despite his kind appearance. Murim wonders what it is, and almost decides to use the Eye of the Creator, but stops himself. He thinks to himself that it's okay, nothing seems strange. After that, Murim successfully leaves the castle, remembering that this is the first time he has ever left its walls. After walking for a while, he looks ahead in surprise, for he stumbles upon a magical tower and quickly enters, approaching the administrator. Seeing him, the administrator asks why Murim has come. Yurin explains that he wants to use the teleport. The administrator immediately jumps up in surprise and asks if Yurin has used the teleport before. Yurin replies that this is his first time. The administrator then informs him that they will have to create a trajectory specifically for him. Hearing this, Yurin remembers that he entered the trajectory system in the same way as in airlines. The administrator then asks Yurin about his destination, to which Yurin replies that it is Az Castle. The administrator comments that it is quite far away and begins the process. After calculating the cost, the administrator informs Yurin that it will cost 50 gold coins. Yurin needs to pay, and also sign a ticket for use. As expected, the teleport will be expensive. That is why Yurin borrowed money from Peru. Yurin fills out the form using the fictitious name Polion, which he once used when playing online games. After checking the documents, the administrator tells Yurin to follow him and leads him to the rooms upstairs. The administrator instructs Yurin to enter the room and tells him that he will know he has arrived when he hears a knock. Yurin goes inside, amazed by the teleportation chamber. Suddenly, the tower is shaken by a flash of lightning, and in the next moment, Yurin hears a knock on the door. This is a signal that he has arrived at his destination. Yurin is shocked at how quickly this happened. A man with blonde hair greets him and welcomes him to Castle S. Nervous, Yurin comments that he didn't feel a thing and is already here. The brown-haired man smiles and explains that a comfortable warp experience is the pride of their magic tower. Hearing this, Yurin wonders if he accidentally installed the warp experience instead of the driving experience. The man then shows Yurin the exit, wishing him a pleasant journey and inviting him to use their services again. Yurin exits the magic tower and immediately notices the Western-style buildings, which are completely different from those of Marquis Castle. Since Castle S is located in the western region, the architecture differs in form and style. Not only that, but Yurin also notices that the roads are filled with crowds of people. After looking around, Yurin decides that his first priority is to find the blacksmith's alley. He begins asking passers-by for directions. After receiving directions, Yurin sets off on his search. But no matter how hard he searches, he cannot find the unicorn blacksmith. He looks up and sees that it is already getting dark, so Yurin decides to check one last alley. Climbing the stairs, he notices a blacksmith at work. With his huge hammer, he was already making some kind of new sword to order. The black-haired man looks up and asks if Yurin is a customer. The blacksmith asks what the main character wants to order from him. Yurin replies that he wants to ask something and inquires if there is a local smithy called the Unicorn Smithy. Upon hearing the name of the shop, the black-haired man tells Yurin that such a shop does not yet exist. Yurin is shocked, wondering if he made a mistake, and grabs his head. But then the man admits that he was actually planning to use the name Unicorn Forge for his shop in the near future. Hearing his words, Yurin immediately uses the creator's eye skill on the black-haired man and checks his status window. The man's name is Gyronox, and his traits include the creation of magical weapons and a kinship with fire at level 3, as well as concentration and accuracy at level 2. His affinity for Yurin is 14 points, which Yurin finds interesting. Seeing his characteristics, Yurin rejoices, thinking he has found the right person. He asks Gyronox if he can take a look at the weapons he sells in his shop. Gyronox agrees, and invites Yurin to come with him to take a look. Yurin walks around, examining the weapons, and then asks Gyronox how his business is going. Hearing this, Gyronox smiles awkwardly and explains that his shop is in a corner, and since his skills are still lacking, customers usually just look around and leave without buying anything. Because of this, he doesn't know how much longer he can hold out. Yurin finds this very strange, because the weapons he sees are no joke. Each of the swords has excellent abilities and blessings. Yurin asks if Gyronox made all these swords himself. Gyronox confirms that he did, but insists that they turned out to be failures. Stunned, Yurin listens as Gyronox explains that after completion, the swords became strangely heavy, so much so that even people with tremendous strength could barely lift them. As a result, no one bought them. Yurin, however, knows the real problem. Only unworthy people tried to wield these swords. If someone qualified had taken them, the swords would have lent him their power. Realizing that Gyronox does not yet understand his own value, Urim happily tells him that he will buy 2 swords. Gearnox begins to worry and asks why he should buy them if they are defective. Urim, meanwhile, wants to give the swords to Eren and Kraid, but he is also looking for a true treasure. So he asks Gearnox if he has any heavily rusted weapons. Gearnox is shocked by this request, but still shows him a pile of rusty weapons, explaining that usually no one is interested in them. Usually, they are collected and sold for next to nothing, since no one buys them anyway. But, as Urim planned, he finds the weapon he was looking for, and he puts his hand in the box. Gearnox admits that he did not forge this item, and does not know where it came from. It was lying around in the warehouse, and he thought about throwing it away, but decided that would be wasteful, so he left it there. Upon seeing the weapon, Urim immediately declares that he will take it as well. Gearnox is surprised, but agrees to sell everything to Urim for only 2 gold coins, since Urim also chose a defective piece. Urim is delighted with the deal, knowing that once the true nature of these weapons is revealed, they will be worth not just 200 gold coins each, but possibly even more. Suddenly, Urim remembers something else. He realizes that it is not only the weapon that is valuable. Gearnox himself is also of interest. He can be bought too. Therefore, Urim advises him, since business is slow, to consider closing the shop and working as a hired craftsman instead. Gearnox smiles, surprised by this suggestion. He admits that he had already thought about closing down before, but it all seems very sudden. Hearing this, Urim decides to formally introduce himself. He announces that he is the invincible spear defending the South, Urim Rocks of the Rocks family. Hearing the name of the Rocks family, Gearnox is shocked and immediately bows, apologizing to Urim. Urim is nervous about this reaction and tries to make Gearnox stand up, but Gearnox insists that he is comfortable as he is and asks Urim not to address him so formally. Urim reluctantly agrees and orders him to get up, thinking to himself that there is nothing to be done about the medieval class system. Then Gearnox asks why Urim would hire a blacksmith like him. Urim replies that it is because of his special talent. Gearnox denies this, saying that he has no talent, which is why his master scolded him every day. Urim is shocked to hear this. He doesn't know who Gearnox's master was, but it's clear that he was trained very harshly. Urim explains that he visited many smithies that day and saw many weapons, but Gearnox stood out. They were crafted and finished with exceptional care. His swords are superb, but what impressed Urim most was the braiding on the handles, which is surprisingly meticulous and important for preventing slippage. Seeing this detail, Urim believes that Gearnox has a special talent that will one day blossom and bear fruit. Urim just made this up on the spot, but he became curious to see if it would actually work. Gearnox decided to follow Urim after hearing this, which pleased him. But then Gearnox laughed, noticing that Urim was very different from the rumors. Laughing, Urim asked if he meant the rumors that he was a scoundrel. After that, Urim laughed too and looked at the dagger. Then he told Gearnox that he would show him something interesting. He pricked his finger with the dagger, and blood ran down the blade. He did this to awaken the mystical artifact Agnes. The dagger began to float in the air, creating strong gusts of wind around it. Gearnox was shocked and asked what was happening. Urim explained that it was the legendary Ego Sword, a sword that in the original story was supposed to go to the main character. A pop-up window appeared, asking if Urim would continue to conclude a soul contract with Agnes. Urim agreed, and suddenly the dagger shattered into pieces, rapidly reshaping itself from the yellow slime into a new form. Urim was surprised because, according to the settings, the Ego Sword was supposed to have the voice of a cute girl, but the current voice was not like that at all. The dagger mocked Urim, demanding to know who he was in order to sign a contract with him. Urim didn't understand, but the Ego Sword continued, stating that Urim had no talent at all. This angered Urim, as the Ego Sword seemed disappointed that it couldn't sense any mana in him, but he didn't like this attitude. The Ego Sword continued to taunt him, calling him a nobody. Urim grew angrier, thinking to himself that the sword didn't even sound like the sassy schoolgirl character he had imagined. Then the Ego Sword asked how Urim knew about its location and the spell of liberation. Urim replied that he had heard about it from the Great Prophet, a background detail he had forcibly added to the novel for plausibility. The ego sword found this impossible to believe, and asked why the great prophet would tell such things to someone as useless as Urim. Then he asked if Urim also knew about the ego sword's abilities. Urim grinned and replied that he already knew everything, since he was the one who had created this setting from the very beginning. Agnes could be divided into two parts. One was the main body, and the other was a secondary body that functioned as a free-form weapon. Each part could transform into any type of weapon the owner could imagine. In the original story, the main character used it as both a sword and a shield. Even if the secondary weapon was lost, it always returned to the main body. The ego sword realized that Urim really knew about its abilities, but began to tease him again, saying that he would never be able to use them, since it could only be wielded with mana. The sword told him to give up. Urim, fed up, snapped back that the sword was too noisy. He pointed his finger at the ego sword, forcing it to obey. Urim decided to carry it in its transformed state as a ring. Being attached to Urim, the ego sword suddenly felt a strange warmth. This assured Urim that martial arts energy could also work instead of mana for the ego sword. Turning to Girinox, Urim asked how long it would take him to settle his affairs. Girinox replied that he could do it in just 2 days. Upon hearing this, Urim instructed him to meet at noon 2 days later in front of Central Park at Castle AS. Later, as Urim was walking down the street, he was noticed by Ilya, who asked why Urim was at Castle AS. Urim wonders why Ilya is there, but suddenly feels that the situation in front of Central Park seems strangely familiar, and wonders if it is what he thinks it is. Ilya, riding her horse, notices Urim and stops to talk to him. Urim feels that this moment mirrors the scene where the original protagonist first meets Ilya. Ilya continues to call out to Urim, but when he doesn't respond, she raises her voice to get his attention. Urim quickly apologizes, reflecting on how the course of history has changed. Ilya dismounts from her horse and asks why Urim is here. Urim replies that he has come to find a blacksmith. Ilya does not understand, pointing out that the Rox family already has many blacksmiths. Urim agrees, but explains that he wants to use the services of his own personal blacksmith. Ilya smiles, saying she would have helped him if he had told her in advance. Urim continues, saying that everything is fine as he has already found someone good, and then points to Girinox, who arrives after gathering his things. Girinox hurries to the meeting place and asks how long Urim has been waiting. Urim replies that he arrived just in time and introduces him to Ilya, his fiancée. While they are talking, one of the knights addresses Ilya as captain, reminding her that they need to leave, but also asks about Urim's identity. The knight's name is Mask, and Ilya introduces Urim to him as her fiancé. Urim rocks. Mask's expression changes when he hears this, but he remains calm, greets Urim, and introduces himself as the commander of the 5th Squad of the Marquis Marcus family's Steel Hammer Knight Order, Musk Malin. Urim politely replies that it is a pleasure to meet him. Urim, however, already knows Musk quite well, titles aside, as he is the one who created this character. Simply put, Musk is an extra with nothing special about him except his lousy personality. In the original novel, the situation played out as follows. Musk and his knightly order block the way, refusing to budge. Musk tells them to step aside if they don't want to die. Then the main character steps forward, a fight breaks out, and Elijah appears just in time to stop it, beginning his relationship with the main character. The important part after that is that the main character accompanies Ilya into battle and saves her from mortal danger. But now Urim can't find the main character anywhere to bring him back into the story. Since he can't let Ilya die, he intervenes himself. That is why Urim asks Ilya where they are going. Ilya explains that orc raids have become more frequent near Ass Castle, and their knightly order has received orders to scout and clear the area. The protagonist listened to her attentively. Upon hearing this, Urim asks Ilya for a favor. He wants to accompany her. He asks her to take him with her. Ilya is very surprised and asks why. Why does he want to do this? Urim explains that he wants to gain real combat experience and also wants to see her skills. Ilya objects that it will be dangerous. Urim replies that it's okay, because at least he's good at running away. After thinking about it, And seeing how the main character is smiling and wants to do it, as well as the bewildered blacksmith, Ilya orders Mask to give Urin a horse. Mask strongly disagrees, saying that they are not going for a walk and that they must not lose vigilance, even if the enemies are just orcs. He points out that he does not sense any mana from Urin or Girnox, and insists that they have neither the ability nor the luxury to protect them. Hearing his complaints, Ilya firmly reminds Musk that she is not asking for a favor, but is giving an order, so he must obey without further argument. Masku, dissatisfied, has no choice but to obey, and he reluctantly says that he will prepare the horse right away. As he leaves, he mutters that if Ilya is so upset, she should just make him captain. Urin and Ilya watch in silence. After a while, the group sets off on their mission. During the ride, Ilya tells Urin to stay close to her because it will be dangerous. Urin agrees and tells Girnox to hold on tight. Girnox, looking nervous, holds on tight as they set the horses in motion. Finally, they reach their destination, and Ilya orders the knights to split into groups of 5 to search for orc settlements. She strictly forbids them from attacking alone, and instructs them that if they find a settlement, they must immediately retreat and launch a signal flare. After giving her orders, Ilya leads her team, including Urin, in a different direction. Later, at dawn, Ilya's group is still searching. The battlefield is once again littered with bodies, but the orcs' tracks are too confusing, making it very difficult to find anything. One of the soldiers asks what they should do, as it will soon be dark. Elijah thinks for a moment, and decides that they should return for the day, but suddenly she looks up at the sky in surprise, as a signal flare from another team suddenly takes off. At that moment, another flare shoots up into the sky, and then another. Several flashes light up the sky. Ilya asks how many were launched. The soldier replies that he saw 5, but Urin knows that there were actually 4. Ilya reacts quickly and decides to head for the nearest one launched in the west. They rush there with all their might, the horses running at full speed, but when they arrive, they find only a terrible scene before them. All the soldiers are dead and already lying on the ground, and at the sight of this horror, Ilya freezes in shock. Another soldier also rode closer, and, looking at the corpses in shock, noticed their comrades' armor had simply melted, and with it, their bodies. The guy wondered how this could have happened, and while the soldier was examining all this, Elijah immediately called on everyone to quickly move to the next area to the south, and they immediately rush in that direction. They rode their horses even harder than last time, but here too, a shocking scene awaited them. The battlefield was again littered with the bodies of their dead comrades. The soldier immediately suggested moving on to the next area. In order to make it in time this time, Ilya agrees. But Urin loudly objects, insisting that they should not move right now. Ilya asked Urin why he objected, and he explains that the orcs in this area are scattered, and the soldiers have killed them one by one. This means that there is no chance of victory this way. Urin suggests stopping the operation and firing a signal flare to gather their forces in one place. Hearing this, one of the soldiers snaps at Urin, telling him to shut up, as he has no right to interfere, and even blames Urin for the mess they are in. Urin recalls that in the original story, the main character was also cursed at in this moment, and even readers criticized him for annoying them. The soldier continues to yell at Urin, humiliating him and telling him not to interfere if he doesn't know anything about fighting. Urin points at the soldier and coldly tells him to shut up. The soldier is shocked and suddenly falls off his horse, writhing in pain. Ilya does not understand the situation and looks at Urin's face. Urin, visibly angry, tells the soldier to know his place. The excruciating pain subdues the soldier, and he begins to beg. Urin orders him to just watch silently. Then Urin turns his attention back to Ilya. In the original story, Ilya did not listen to the main character and insisted on her opinion. But now that Urin has changed the situation, he asks her to judge wisely. Ilya silently watches Urin, then agrees, deciding to think with a cool head. She orders the knights to immediately launch a blue signal flare to gather them all in one place. The soldiers launch the flare into the air, and now they just sit, cover the bodies of their comrades, and wait for reinforcements. Girnox, struck by Urin's determination, whispers to him about how he made everyone move according to his will. Yurin laughs, replying that it's all nonsense. While Ilya talks to the other knights, Jiranox notices that many soldiers will soon gather. Yurin, however, remains silent, which shocks Jiranox. Yurin explains that most of the soldiers will not be able to come at all, because an orc named Karada has already gone around and dealt with them. Jiranox is very frightened and asks what Yurin is waiting for in such a dangerous place. Yurin smiles and replies that he is waiting for a real battle. Suddenly, a wounded soldier runs up to them, shouting to everyone, including the captain, to run away immediately. He looks pitiful. The soldier cries and tries to speak because it is almost here, but Ilya suddenly goes into battle mode, and her hands immediately raise a sword in front of her, and she looks ahead, seeing what was chasing him after all. The soldier is being pursued by a multitude of orc warriors, and there are many of them. Ilya is frightened by this sight, because there are really a lot of them, and turns to Yurin, apologizing sincerely, because she believes that he will now die because of her. Everyone will die because of her. Yurin calmly replies that everything is fine, because they will not die here. Then Yurin begins to walk towards the orc monsters. Ilya asks in shock what he is going to do. Ignoring her, Yurin tells Agnes that it's time to try out what they've been practicing for the last 2 days. He then orders Agnes to create black iron bullets using her secondary body. This is a technique Yurin acquired when his divine energy absorption of 10,000 poisons reached 3 stars, but he has not yet had a chance to test it. Yurin's black iron explosions are at level 1. A skill that launches hidden weapons that explode when infused with internal energy into bullets. However, it requires hidden black iron weapons to use. Thanks to Agnes, Yurin now has the ability to create such weapons. He throws it towards the orcs, and it attaches itself to one of their axes. After a few seconds, the bullets detonate, creating a powerful explosion, which defeats many orcs at once. The main character watches this spectacle. And now, instead of orcs, there is only green mush left. Yurin recalls the secondary weapon, and it returns. The guy happily notes how convenient this is. The remaining orcs roar and rush at him, but he uses his bullet weapon again, defeating another group with his purple aura. Another huge and powerful explosion occurs. Ilya runs up to him, asking what exactly he is throwing at the monsters. Yurin shows her his secondary weapon, explaining that it is called Black Iron Explosion, and promises to explain in detail later. Then he tells her that he has already significantly reduced the number of orcs. Stunned, Ilya shouts at the soldiers, asking what they are waiting for. She urges them on, saying that now they can win. This is their only chance. At her command, Ilya and the soldiers rush at the orcs. Ilya defeats the first one, cutting off his head with a single blow, while the other soldiers also manage to defeat several. But then, seeing that defeat is near, one of the orcs tries to escape. Another orc, this time with red skin, blocks his path. The green orc is tiny compared to the red one, and trembles with fear. The red orc grabs the green one by the head, and lifting him up, kills him on the spot by squeezing his head. Ilya, the knights, and even the other orcs are stunned by this shocking scene. Ilya is frightened by the ridiculous size of the red orc. Yurin, however, remains silent, thinking that the legendary orc warrior has finally appeared. The red orc is none other than Karada. Yurin knows that if they don't defeat him today, they will all die. Karada roars, releasing its reddish, menacing aura, which creates massive waves of wind and nearly blows everyone away. He swings his huge sword with a sweeping motion and then takes a stance, ready to lunge at Ilya. And then he does it, jumping right onto her head. The girl looks up in shock. She knows she won't be able to parry his attack, so she prepares to dodge. At that moment, Yurin rushes to save her, scolding her for just standing there. They barely dodge Karada's blow, which crashes into the ground with tremendous force, while Yurin carries Ilya on his back to safety. Once they are safe, Yurin yells at Ilya, telling her that she just barely escaped death. But Ilya is stunned when she sees the ground around them. All her soldiers are dead, lying face down on the ground, and Karada is already preparing to attack again. Yurin quickly decides to use the black iron explosion weapon against Karada and throws it at him. The capsule flies straight to its target, the red bastard. It lands near Kurata's ear and detonates with a huge, powerful explosion. The monster's head should burst immediately, but to everyone's shock, it has no effect. There is not a single scratch on Kurata. After taking the blow, Kurata says something in his language, and then he laughs. Urin is shocked to realize that none of his attacks are working. Since Kurata is an orc warrior, his skin was originally described as being as tough as steel, but now, seeing it with his own eyes, it becomes terrifying. Ilya, furious at Kurata for killing her subordinates, curses him. She considers it unforgivable and takes a stance, pouring her aura into her sword. She lunges straight at Kurata, using her acceleration skill for a sharp lunge, delivering quick blows, but Kurata easily blocks her blade with his own. Ilya continues to attack relentlessly, while Kurata parries each blow effortlessly. This continues for a very long time. The girl's feet barely touch the ground, but her blade does not touch the monster either. Jironox and Urin watch closely. Urin is impressed, thinking that this is to be expected from Ilya. The Empress of the Sword is indeed too strong. It's only the beginning of the novel, but she is strong enough to pressure Kurata to such an extent. Even though Kurata's steel skin and armor are under attack from Ilya, he still stands firm, as if nothing has happened. Kurata continues to mutter in his language. The girl doesn't understand him, so she hesitates a little. At that moment, the monster suddenly releases a huge burst of aura. Ilya is stunned. An orc using an aura is unheard of. The monster even grunts with its own coolness. Kurata begins his counterattack, and Ilya barely manages to block it. As in the original novel, Ilya begins to lose ground to Kurata. Unable to cope with his overwhelming power, she falls to the ground. Kurata, unharmed, walks towards her. The knights rush to her aid and help her up. Disappointed, Ilya admits that she cannot defeat Kurata. With no other choice, she tells the soldiers that they must retreat. But as Kurata approaches Ilya, Urin intervenes. Kurata speaks again in his language, but Urin ignores him, taking out a dagger for a direct throw. He aims his eye directly at the monster again. He throws it with all his might, frightening Kurata, who instinctively deflects it with his sword, breaking it with a single blow. Urin is shocked. Kurata destroyed his dagger with one blow, and then the main character decided to watch some more. The ogre stood there and continued to growl, probably saying something too clever. However, Kurata suddenly notices something, a cut on his shoulder. There was a plate of explosives on part of the horn. The wound instantly explodes, creating a powerful flash. Kurata was wounded, and his arm became useless. Black blood dripped onto the floor. Urin laughed, explaining that the first dagger was a decoy. While Kurata was blocking the direct shot, he didn't notice the real dagger that Urin threw from behind. Smirking, Urin points out that although Kurata's skin is as tough as steel, not every part of his body is invulnerable. Weak spots appear in the gaps in his armor, and Urin will not hesitate to exploit them. The ogre stood and listened to all this, puffing with rage. In a rage, Kurata swings his sword at Urin. Caught off guard, Urin barely manages to dodge. This happens in a matter of milliseconds, and he avoids the next blow. Then he has to dodge again as the monster launches another attack. He counterattacks, firing another bullet, mocking Kurata and asking where he is going. The bullet hits, causing another explosion. Stepping forward confidently, Urin smirks, asking if Kurata is angry, and then teasing him, saying that he has no intention of obediently letting himself be caught. But then Urin is greatly frightened when he notices that the orc warrior is running away from him and preparing to attack Jironox. The orc warrior leaps high into the air, his massive sword flashing as it descends upon Jironox. Faced with this sudden and terrifying situation, Urin had no choice but to act immediately. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, determined to save him at any cost. At this critical moment, Urin decided to use the dragon step technique. Although it was only a minor version of the technique, he poured all his inner energy into it, pushing his body to its absolute limit to increase his speed. Just as the orc warrior's sword was about to strike Jironox, Urin arrived just in time and managed to pull him away from the deadly blow. The warrior's sword crashed into the ground with terrifying force, releasing an overwhelming aura that shook the surroundings. The orc warrior's eyes widened in shock at the sight of Urin saving Girinox in the blink of an eye. Ilya, watching from afar, was no less amazed. She couldn't believe Urin's incredible speed and bravery. After dragging Girinox to safety, Urin realized that the battle had to end quickly. He stood firmly in front of the orc warrior and summoned his sword Agnes. In a commanding voice, he ordered the blade to transform into the blood flower butterfly, one of the highest-ranking hidden weapons passed down in the Sichuan Tong family. And he swung it forward. In an instant, the blade broke apart into a swarm of beautiful butterflies, shimmering with a mysterious aura. The swarm of butterflies was almost at the monster's face and rushed forward, using a spinning shot technique. Despite the chaos of battle, Ilya was mesmerized by the breathtaking sight of the butterflies. She couldn't help but quietly compliment their beauty. The orc warrior, however, reacted differently. Instinctive fear gripped his heart, and he began to wave his arms. And then he swung his weapon desperately, chopping at the butterflies with frenzied speed. But his efforts were in vain. He couldn't kill them all. One of the butterflies landed right on his chest, glowing with an intense white light. The orc warrior let out a terrified roar just before the butterfly exploded. The explosion knocked the orc warrior down. Both Ilya and Urin were shocked by the destructive power of the hidden weapon. Urin expected the blood flower butterfly to be powerful, but he didn't know that it could pierce the monster through and through. He also did not expect it to completely destroy the orc warriors with a single blow. The soldiers standing nearby were just as stunned, their voices trembling as one of them stammered that the orc warrior had finally fallen and victory was theirs. However, Ilya quickly regained her composure. Thinking clearly, she warned the soldiers that the battle was not over yet, as there were still smaller forces of orcs nearby. The younger orcs, frightened by her statement, began to panic. Without wasting a minute, Ilya rushed towards them, leading her soldiers to end the battle once and for all. Meanwhile, Girinox approached Urin with gratitude. He sincerely thanked him for saving his life. Thus, Urin's first real battle ended in success. When night fell, Ilya and her soldiers completely destroyed the remaining orc forces, securing their victory. After the battle, Urin approached Ilya with concern, asking if she was injured. Ilya assured him that she was unharmed, but admitted that since she owed him her life, it was difficult for her to express how much she appreciated his actions. Urin just laughed warmly, telling her that helping each other was natural and not worth dwelling on. Then he reminded her of the question she had asked earlier, whether he had studied sword fighting. With a calm smile, he revealed the truth. Instead of swords, he had trained in concealed weapons. Ilya was visibly shocked by this revelation. She asked if he really meant weapons like daggers. Urin confirmed this, explaining that the explosive sphere earlier, and even the butterfly technique he had just used, were all concealed weapons. Ilya was deeply impressed and somewhat stunned by his skill. She realized that Urin had mastered hidden weapons to an incredible degree. Urin secretly hoped that this experience would broaden her horizons. After all, Ilya had been taught her whole life to believe that the sword was the supreme weapon. Now, perhaps, she would begin to respect the potential of other arts as well. One of the soldiers quickly reported to Ilya about the preparation of the magic bag. Hearing this, Ilya raised her sword and firmly stated that even if they couldn't collect all the orc remains right now, they should at least take the remains of the orc warriors as proof of their victory. With a sharp movement, she gathered the remains of the orc warrior herself. Girinox was stunned to see the size of the orc warrior and shook his head in disbelief. He noticed that the magic bag would surely get dirty if they put the orc warrior's remains inside it just like that. Ilya calmly looked at him and explained that it was fine because the bag was originally prepared for storing monster remains. Therefore, they did not need to worry about it getting ruined. With that assurance, she put the orc warrior's remains into the bag without hesitation. Once the task was complete, Ilya turned to Urin and told him that they needed to leave quickly as the night was getting late and dark. The group mounted their horses and set off, but their journey was soon interrupted by Mask and two other soldiers who suddenly appeared. Narrowing her eyes, Ilya demanded to know where Mask had been, reminding him that quite some time had passed since the signal flare had been fired. Mask visibly flinched, as if afraid of being caught for some misdeed. With a trembling voice, he explained that they had gone too far ahead and were attacked by orcs on their way back, which delayed them in battle. Ilya listened attentively, her expression skeptical. She found his words suspicious and pressed him further, asking why only 2 soldiers had returned with him if his story was true. Mask quickly replied that the other soldiers had been killed because the orcs were much stronger than expected. Unconvinced, Ilya demanded to see the bodies of the fallen soldiers and ordered Mask to take her to the battlefield. Mask's face faltered, and he nervously tried to convince her not to go, claiming that it was too late and that they could check the site tomorrow. But Ilya's voice rose sharply with authority as she shouted that he would take her there immediately. With that, Musk let out a long, heavy sigh and stepped closer to Ilya, pretending to describe the location. However, in an instant, he drew his sword and struck her with a sudden blow. Ilya was caught off guard, her eyes widening in shock at the betrayal. But before the blade could reach her, Murim reacted with lightning speed. He threw his dagger with pinpoint accuracy, striking Musk's arm and causing him to drop his weapon. Mask cried out in pain and fell from his horse, clutching his wounded arm. Murim's voice burned with rage as he confronted Mask, asking if he really believed that such a foolish act would deceive him. He pointed out that any soldier claiming to have fought a fierce battle with orcs should be exhausted or wounded. Yet Musk and his men looked perfectly normal. His words cut through the air as he accused Mask and the 2 soldiers of colluding with the orcs from the beginning, leaking information and betraying their comrades. Upon hearing this, Musk began to shake uncontrollably, and his reaction alone was enough to confirm his guilt. Murim knew the truth about the betrayal because he was the one who had written the story from the beginning, and nothing could be hidden from his knowledge. Elijah, filled with righteous anger, drew his sword to carry out justice. Mask fell to his knees and begged for mercy, desperately speaking of the merits his family had brought to the kingdom. But Ilya's face remained cold, and she refused to listen to what she considered to be nothing but lies and excuses. With unwavering determination, she struck with her sword, ending his deception once and for all. Murim, watching her fierce determination, could not help but admire her strength and resolute character. Ilya then ordered her soldiers to seize the 2 remaining traitors. They fell to the ground, begging for mercy, and claiming that they were only following Mask's orders. The next day at AAS Castle, morning turned to noon. In his chambers, Giranox was busy trying to wake Murim from a deep sleep. Murim slowly opened his eyes, confused, and asked what had happened. Giranox laughed lightly and told him to wake up properly, as it was already lunchtime. Then, with a playful grin, he added that Ilya had arrived, wearing a stunning black dress. She asked the main character if he had slept well. Hearing this, Murim sat up in surprise, his eyes widening as he imagined the unexpected sight of Ilya in such an elegant outfit. Opening his eyes and noticing Ilya standing there, the first thing Murim asked about was her unusual outfit. Something completely different from anything she had ever worn before. Instead of answering his question, Ilya waved him off and calmly told him to go with her to her house, which immediately surprised Murim. He was shocked by such a proposal. She said that her father wanted to meet him, so he had to accompany her. Looking at her now, Murim thought to himself that the title of the most beautiful woman in the world was indeed no exaggeration. Her graceful presence proved that it was true. Having no other choice, Murim accepted the invitation, although in his heart, he remembered the events from the original novel. This was the very moment when the main character saved Ilya and later went to meet Marquis Marcus. Then Ilya decided to leave the room, telling Murim to tidy himself up and meet her outside. Before that, Murim glanced at her status window and realized something important. Her sympathy for him had already risen to the level of favor, and that was simply because he had helped her once. For Murim, this was both unexpected and significant. The scene switched to the courtyard. Ilya waited patiently for Murim to get ready, and finally, he arrived. Soon they met and walked together. However, they did not get very far. They were stopped by a crowd of commoners. When they saw Ilya, the people began to call her the Knight of Iron Blood. It turned out that rumors had already spread. They said she was a warrior who bravely faced a terrifying orc warrior without retreating a single step. This honorable title suited her very well, and it was exactly the same title mentioned in the original novella. Then the commoners noticed Urim standing next to her. The young women among them blushed and whispered excitedly, calling him Urim the Steel Mage and remarking on how handsome he looked. Urim was completely taken aback by this new title, but the explanation became obvious. After hearing the testimonies of the surviving soldiers, people began to spread stories. Since the soldiers had seen Urim wielding steel attacks, they assumed he was some kind of mage capable of controlling steel. Ilya, with a faint blush on her cheeks, turned to Urim and repeated once again that she was deeply grateful to him for saving her life not once, but twice. Urim felt a rush of happiness at her words, and warmly replied that protecting her was only natural. Ilya went on to explain that earlier that morning, she had led the soldiers back into the forest to retrieve the remains they had left behind. When they arrived at the battlefield, the scene was far more devastating than she had imagined. The gruesome sight shocked her. At that moment, she realized with absolute certainty that if Urina had not been there yesterday, she too would have died. Urim listened silently to her confession, saying nothing, but the weight of her words sank deep into him. Ilya, however, did not allow despair to overcome her. As she continued walking, she firmly resolved in her heart to train harder than ever before and grow into a warrior who would stand above all others. She made the decision that she would never suffer defeat again. Hearing her determination, Urim smiled to himself. He knew that this was the turning point when she would finally blossom into her true talent, ultimately becoming a powerful warrior worthy of the legendary Sword Emperor. Soon, they went outside. Ilya informed them that although the Marcus family estate was not far from the castle, her father had nevertheless arranged a warp circle to transport them in comfort. The three of them stepped into the circle, where the mages began to chant spells. In the next moment, the landscape around them changed, and they found themselves in front of a grand estate. Their jaws dropped to the floor. Urim was amazed at how the surroundings had changed in the blink of an eye, while Ilya calmly welcomed him to her family home. Without stopping, she led them inside, with Urim and Jiranok following close behind. Urim, however, felt a strange sensation in his body and realized that he might be experiencing what was once described in the Magic Tower as warp sickness. Meanwhile, Jiranok could hardly contain his amazement at the immense beauty of the Marcus estate. With his eyes wide open, he even asked Urim if he also lived in such a magnificent mansion as this one. Urim tried to maintain his composure, reminding himself that he would soon be officially welcomed and seated at the table, just like the original protagonist in the novella. In Tyrion, he ate only simple soup every day, but today, he was sure that he would finally taste noble food worthy of royalty. When they entered the grand dining room, Ilya's father was already waiting. With an authoritative look, he addressed Urim, ordering him to come closer. Urim respectfully stepped forward and prepared to greet him, but Ilya's father simply waved his hand, saying that such formalities were unnecessary, and asked Urim to sit down comfortably. Urim modestly took his place at the dining table, maintaining his composure in front of Ilya's father. Marquis Marcus began by expressing his gratitude, saying that first and foremost, even before being Urim's future father-in-law, he was immensely grateful as Ilya's father. He sincerely appreciated Urim for saving his daughter's life. Urim responded politely, modestly stating that it was no trouble, and that protecting Ilya was simply what he naturally had to do. Shortly thereafter, the head chef arrived, carefully carrying the dish and placing it in front of Urim. At first, Urim's eyes lit up with anticipation, and he almost drooled as he eagerly wondered what exquisite dish they had prepared for him. However, to his surprise, the food turned out to be nothing more than the traditional Tyrian soup of the Marcus family. Although it was slightly different from the Rox family's version, the Marcus family had their own secret recipe that made the soup richer and more flavorful. Still, Urim's excitement quickly faded. He sighed inwardly, feeling disappointed to see the same soup in front of him again. Marquis Marcus, however, seemed very proud of this dish. He began to talk at length about tradition, explaining that, like the Rox family, the Marcus family also had a custom of eating Tyrian soup after battles. He insisted that Euron eat well, treating it as both food and an honor. Left with no choice, Euron picked up a spoon and began to eat. As the meal continued, Marcus suddenly decided to get straight to the point. He looked at Euron and asked him directly when he intended to marry Ilya. Euron was taken aback by the bold question and nearly choked on his soup. Marcus continued to press, saying directly that Euron was about to marry his daughter, leaving no room for hesitation. Ilya's cheeks instantly turned bright red, and she lowered her gaze, clearly excited and embarrassed by her father's words. Euron, however, quickly realized that Marcus was testing him. From what he remembered, Marcus's sympathy for him was initially at -10, and the fact that it had risen even slightly had to mean that something significant had changed compared to the events of the original novel. Deciding to give a bold answer, Euron declared that he wanted to marry Ilya right now. His words made Ilya blush even more, her heart pounding at his sudden confidence. But Euron quickly continued, clarifying that he had not yet become the official heir to his family, and was still viewed coldly because of his past life as a scoundrel. With determination in his voice, Euron firmly stated that he would change himself and grow into a man truly worthy of Ilya. Only when he officially became the heir would he take her hand in marriage. Ilya was clearly impressed by his determination, her eyes softening with admiration. However, her father was not yet convinced. Marcus asked directly whether it was even possible for Euron to become the heir, given that his brother was known as a genius. He pressed further, asking if Euron truly believed he could surpass his brothers and take the position of heir. Without the slightest hesitation, Euron looked him straight in the eye and replied with complete confidence that he could and would do so. Marcus's stern expression slowly melted into a smile. He admitted that he was impressed by Euron's changes and praised his determination. At that moment, Marcus decided that he would support Euron's growth in future. After that, Marcus changed the subject, informing Euron that his father had already been contacted. This revelation shocked Euron. Marcus explained that news of the events had already reached the Rox family through connection magic, as someone had passed on the story. Euron asked curiously what exactly his father had said. Marcus replied that Marquis Rox wanted to talk to him directly through the magic of connection and requested a conversation later. He added that as soon as the meal was over, he would personally escort Euron to the communication room so that he could contact his father. Grateful for this, Euron thanked him, although he noticed that Ilya was quietly sulking beside him for reasons he couldn't quite understand. In any case, it seemed that he had managed to make a favorable impression on Marcus. Later that day, Euron was escorted to the communication room. There, a wizard, like one from Harry Potter, was already casting a spell and summoning the main character's father. The magic circle lit up, and suddenly he found himself face to face with his father through a live projection. It strangely resembled a modern video call, as if a beam of magic was projecting his father's image into the room. His father's expression, however, was filled with anger. Euron, stunned, quickly apologized, trying to calm his father's rage. The Marquis immediately began to scold him harshly, his voice echoing like thunder. And yet, beneath his anger, the Marquis's concern was evident. After his initial curses, he suddenly asked if Euron was injured anywhere. Euron assured him that he was perfectly fine. Then came the question that mattered most. His father asked if it was true that Euron had saved Ilya and killed the orc warrior. Euron nervously admitted that it was true, but downplayed his actions, saying that he had just been lucky and that it had all happened by chance. His father, after a long pause, decided not to press for details. He said he would hear the full story when Euron returned. Finally, the Marquis asked when Euron planned to return. Euron replied that he would return the day after tomorrow. Upon hearing this, his father gave his son one last order. Euron must take his brother with him when he returns. Euron was shocked to hear this. After talking with his father, Euron spends a joyful evening with Ilya and her father, who is taken aback to learn that Euron is leaving tomorrow. Ilya's father, surprised but pleased with the meeting, invites Euron to stay for a few more days, since so much time has passed since their last meeting. Euron smiles politely and replies that he sincerely appreciates the offer, but his father has given him an important task that he must complete without delay. Hearing this, Ilya's father offers to give Urin the magic of warp to make his journey more comfortable and less time-consuming. However, Urin gently declines, explaining that he is still in the process of growing when he must strengthen himself through continuous training, and that dependence on warp magic would only hold him back. Impressed by Urin's determination, Ilya's father laughs warmly and praises his attitude, commenting that Urin has truly grown into a fine young man. He expresses his excitement about how much stronger Urin will become in the future. Urin, slightly embarrassed by the praise, glances at Ilya, thanking her father for his kind words. To his surprise, Ilya also smiles upon hearing his response, which makes Urin wonder why she is smiling so brightly. He suspects that perhaps this time she liked his confident answer, but in fact, there is another reason why Urin refuses to use the Marcus family's warp magic. Leaving the mansion, Urin sets off with Girinox, ready to begin his next journey. However, when they start moving in a different direction, Girinox becomes confused and asks why they are not going towards the capital. Urin turns around with a calm smile and says that there is a place they need to visit first. He points to a massive mountain near the Marquis' estate, a mountain known for being the lair of an ancient dragon. Girinox instantly recognizes it and admits that he once visited this lair long ago, before he opened his smithy. Burning with curiosity, he asks Urin if he plans to go there to make a wish, as the old legends say. Urin smirks and shakes his head, revealing that his true goal is to retrieve the hidden treasure. Girinox looks puzzled, completely unaware of any treasure in that place. What he doesn't know is that this treasure is something only Urin knows about, a secret that originally belonged to the main character of the story. As they approach the mountain, they finally find the entrance to a cave marked Dragon's Lair, which in ancient times was believed to be the home of dragons. To their surprise, even at such an early hour, there are several visitors at the cave. Girinox looks at Urin with concern, wondering if they will be able to find the treasure with so many people around. Urin calmly explains that these people are illusions, fakes created by ancient magic, and tells Girinox that the world is full of hidden secrets. Then, with quiet determination, he orders Girinox to follow him without making a sound as they circle around the mountain to the other side. Girinox, though confused, does not question Urin's order and simply follows him. By the time they reach the other side of the mountain, he looks around in disappointment, saying that there is nothing there. But Urin's sharp eyes have already spotted what he came for: a hidden handle carved into the rock wall, shaped like a car door handle. He carefully scans the area to make sure no one is watching, then grabs the handle and pulls it, just like opening a car door. His companion watched in shock as the magic unfolded before them. Instantly, a hidden door materialized and swings open, revealing a secret passageway behind it. Girinox's eyes widen in disbelief, and he stammers, asking what kind of magic could have created such a thing. Urin doesn't bother with explanations. Instead, he gestures for Girinox to follow him. Together, they step into the secret passageway, and the door closes silently behind them, hiding their presence from the outside world. Girinox discovers that the cave is much brighter than he expected. Amazed by the sight, he suddenly notices a sparkling gemstone embedded in the wall, and his eyes light up with excitement. As soon as he reaches for it, Urin quickly raises his hand, stopping him midway and firmly ordering him not to touch it. Confused, Girinox freezes and looks at Urin, nervously asking what kind of trap could be hidden in something that looks so harmless. Urin smirks and calmly explains that if Girinox had touched the stone, the entire room would instantly turn into a sea of fire. At the mere thought of this, Girinox trembles, his face pales, and he takes a cautious step back. Urin continues forward and tells Girinox to stay right behind him, because the cave is full of numerous traps like this one. Girinox swallows nervously, but obeys without objection, determined not to make a fatal mistake. After a cautious walk through the narrow, glowing tunnels, they finally arrive at what appears to be a normal part of the cave. Urin stops and looks around, confirming that this is the place he was looking for. Girinox, still confused, looks around and mutters that there is nothing here but stone and dust, and an altar. Urin turns to him and asks if he knows what lies beyond this wall. Jironox shakes his head, still not understanding. Urin explains that the so-called dragon's lair that people visit is just a fake, a diversionary tactic. Behind this wall is the real secret room, and right now, he can feel the faint spiritual energy of people bowing and praying outside. Having said that, Urin kneels down near the ancient altar and says that it is time to see the real treasure. Jironox, even more puzzled, asks what treasure he is talking about. Without answering directly, Urin feels around the base of the altar, finds a small hidden handle, and pulls it. A secret compartment opens, revealing a large chest inside. As the lid creaks open, Jironox gasps in disbelief. The chest is overflowing with glittering gold coins and precious stones. His jaw drops, but before he can say anything, Urin ignores the gold and instead picks up a small bundle lying neatly in the center. He explains that this is what he actually came for. Urin opens the bundle, and a glowing system window appears before him. The notification reads, Warrior's Jade. Effect, Rebirth. It is a rare and powerful artifact, an indispensable item for those who seek to become stronger. A satisfied smile spreads across Urin's face as he puts the jade in his pocket and tells Jironox to start packing all the gold into their magic bag. Jironox quickly gets to work, still amazed by the treasure they have discovered. Once everything is packed, they make their way out of the cave. As they descend the mountain path, Jironox, still catching his breath, asks where they will go next. Urin calmly replies that their next destination is the Tower of Magic in the castle, where they will use the official warp gate to continue their journey. Jironox nods understandingly, noting that it is strange how even at such a late hour, so many people are heading towards the countryside. Just then, Urin suddenly stops dead in his tracks. His expression hardens as he notices a mysterious figure in a dark cloak walking down the road ahead. A chill runs down his spine. Using the eye of the creator, Urin tries to assess the characteristics of this person, but as the data appears, his eyes widen in shock. He recognizes her instantly. She is a character who does not appear until the second half of the novel. Jironox notices the sudden change in Urin's behavior and calls his name, but Urin does not respond. His thoughts race as he studies the woman's overwhelming aura, realizing that her power is on a completely different level. There is no doubt about it. He cannot defeat her, not now. Before he can plan his next move, the woman suddenly turns her head. Urin's heart stops, and a single thought flashes through his mind. He needs to get out of there as quickly as possible. Urin tells Jironox to hurry down to the castle, urging him on because he is hungry. Jironox, confused by Urin's sudden change in tone, hurries after him and insists that they walk together. Meanwhile, the mysterious woman in the cloak walking ahead suddenly stops and looks back at Urin. Then the scene shifts to Urin's hotel room, closer to the window of his room, where he sits on his bed, deep in thought. Something about this woman he saw earlier doesn't make sense to him. Her appearance should not have happened. Not now, not so soon. She is a character who should only appear in the second half of the story, and yet she was there, at the dragon's lair, in a place where she had no reason to be at that moment in time. Urin tries to make sense of it, wondering if her appearance means that something has shifted in the chronology of the story. According to his knowledge, this woman's search for the treasures of the divine dragon's cave should take place much later. The fact that it is already happening makes Urin feel uneasy, as if the course of events is subtly changing beyond his control. He also realizes that he doesn't know what the original protagonist is doing or where he has gone. Now everything seems uncertain. For now, Urin decides to focus on what he can control. He takes the warrior's jade and, without hesitation, decides to use it immediately instead of saving it for later. The moment he swallows it, a strong heat rushes through his body. Deciding to endure the pain, Urin sits cross-legged and begins to circulate his energy, entering into deep cultivation. Moments later, a system notification appears before him. Your body is undergoing a transformation, adapting to a stronger form. Urin continues to cultivate until his energy stabilizes. When he finally opens his eyes, another notification pops up, informing him that he has successfully attained the heavenly battle body. This legendary physique, often mentioned in martial arts novels, is the strongest physical trait blessed by the heavens themselves. Whether wielding a sword or striking with his fists, the heavenly battle body can copy and master any technique after seeing it just once. Urim stands up, and a wave of power flows through him. At that moment, the door swings open, and Jiranok enters, calling Urim's name. Urim calmly gives him permission to enter. Jiranok, cheerful as always, asks if Urim is awake and offers to make breakfast, but suddenly stops mid-sentence, and his eyes widen in shock. Pointing at Urim, he exclaims that Urim looks noticeably taller than before. Urim blinks in confusion and tries to laugh it off, insisting that it must be Jiranok's imagination. But Jiranok shakes his head and confidently replies that, as a blacksmith, he can accurately measure sizes just by looking. He gestures with his hand, saying that yesterday Urim was definitely about 178 centimeters tall, and now he is 182. Urim is nervous for a moment, realizing that Jiranok's keen observation is no joke. He laughs awkwardly, praising Jiranok's attention to detail, but then brushes it off, thinking that it's probably for the best. After all, it's the advantage of obtaining the heavenly battle body. Feeling satisfied with his new form, Urim gets ready, and together they head for the Tower of Magic. Upon arrival, they meet the tower administrator. The man greets them politely and asks how he can help. Urim replies that they would like to use the warp service. The administrator asks them their destination, but when Urim says they are heading to the capital, the man's expression immediately turns to stone. He explains that travel to the capital is currently restricted. Urim, taken aback, asks why, and the administrator clarifies that the restriction exists because of potential threats to the royal family. Consequently, only those with special status or permission are allowed inside. Urim frowns, realizing how complicated aristocratic politics can be. Then, deciding to deal with this directly, he reveals his true identity to the administrator. In a calm tone, he introduces himself as Urim Rox, the eldest son of the Marquis Rox family, and points to his companion, saying that Jiranok is his personal blacksmith. The entire room falls silent for a moment. The tower employees stare at Urim in shock before beginning to whisper among themselves. One of them finally speaks up, confirming with disbelief that this is the Steel Mage, Lord Urim himself. Urim smiles modestly and nods, saying that it is true. The workers are clearly amazed, and one of them eagerly asks if it is true that he can continuously throw iron balls that explode on impact. The group surrounding Urim becomes increasingly curious, asking him detailed questions about the formula he used to create his magic and how he was able to target his shots so accurately. Urim finds himself completely surrounded by magicians. Before the situation escalates further, an elderly man steps forward, tapping his staff firmly on the ground, and orders everyone to stop. In the blink of an eye, Urim and Jiranok find themselves transported to a completely different room. They both look around in surprise, unable to understand how they were transported so suddenly. The old man standing before them bows politely and apologizes for his students' behavior, explaining that they can be overly enthusiastic when meeting talented magicians. Still digesting what has just happened, Urim respectfully asks the old man's name. The man smiles kindly and introduces himself as Yubian, head of the Castle Magic Tower Council. Urim's eyes widen in shock when he hears this name. The great mage Yubian. He remembers creating this character himself when he designed this world. In Urim's writings, Yubian appears to be a gentle, wise old man on the surface, a kind grandfather figure admired by his peers. However, when enraged, his true nature is terrifying. A ruthless killer who quietly eliminates anyone who displeases him, leaving no trace behind. Urim realizes that Yubian should never have appeared so early. In fact, he wrote this character as a background figure for fun, and never actually included him in the main storyline. And yet here he is, standing right in front of him in reality. Urim can't help but feel that his luck has taken a strange turn lately. First, the mysterious woman, and now one of the most dangerous men in his world. Yubian gives Urim a gentle smile, saying that he will personally transport him to the capital from this ward. Grateful, Urim bows and thanks him. When Yubian begins to prepare a warp spell, he suddenly pauses and turns to Urin with a curious expression on his face. For some reason, he says, he has a feeling that they will meet Lord Urin again soon. A chill runs down Urin's spine at these words. He forces a smile and replies politely, "Yes, perhaps," though in his mind, he hopes that such a meeting will never happen again. Moments later, the warp is activated. When they arrive in the capital, the warp tower employee warmly welcomes them, instructing them to exit the warp chamber and welcoming them to the tower. Girinox immediately looks around, his eyes widening with excitement as he takes in the sight of the magnificent city. The streets are filled with nobles, dressed in elegant clothes. Girinox asks, "Why are all these buildings so fancy? Even the people look like they've stepped out of a royal painting." Urin smiles lightly and tells Girinox to buy himself some new clothes with the money he gave him. The blacksmith politely refuses, noting that the main character is also dressed quite simply. Continuing on their way, they finally reach the Knight Academy, one of the most prestigious institutions in the kingdom. Girinox can't stop staring at the grandiose architecture. When they reach the entrance, a couple of guards in armor step forward, blocking their way. "What business do you have here?" one of the guards asks sternly. Urin explains that he is here to request a visit, so the guards ask him for his full name and the name of the student he wishes to meet. Urin introduces himself as Urin Rox, the eldest son of the Marquis Rox family, and tells them he is looking for his younger brother, Colin Rox. Upon hearing his name, someone approaches them. At that moment, a tall, silver-haired student standing nearby, clearly also from a noble family, turns his head in surprise upon hearing Urin's name. His sharp features and posture suggest that he may be from the family of the Northern Duke Elion. "Wait," says the young man, coming closer. He asks if he is the same Urin who defeated the orc warrior. Urin blinks in slight confusion, realizing that the rumors have already reached the capital. He did not expect the news to spread so quickly. The silver-haired man studies him closely and continues with a slight smirk. He asks, "Is it true that the main character is strong, isn't it?" Urin's expression hardens as irritation flashes across his face. The silver-haired man addresses him informally, without a shred of respect, despite the fact that this is their first meet. The guy looks a little puzzled, not understanding why Urin's gaze has suddenly turned cold. Pulling himself together, Urin forces a polite smile and replies that it's nothing, and that his interlocutor is simply too kind. Then, maintaining a modest but firm tone, he asks the man's name. The young man smiles confidently and introduces himself as Carrick Elion, the second son of the Duke of Elion. He also mentions, almost casually, that he is a close friend of Colin Rox, Urin's younger brother. Urin nods slowly, thinking that everything is exactly as he expected. Someone with such arrogance could only be from the Elion family. Carrick smiles again and gestures for Urin to follow him, saying that he will personally take him to where Colin is. Although Urin dislikes this guy's smug attitude and the slight tension in his voice, he decides to play along for now and follows him. Before entering the academy grounds, Urin turns around and orders Urinox to wait outside until he returns. As they walk through the academy's majestic corridors, Carrick glances at Urin and strikes up a conversation about the rumors circulating in the capital. He mentions that he heard how Urin defeated an orc warrior alongside Ilya. With a knowing smile, Carrick adds that he can understand Ilya's success. After all, she is a promising knight. But Urin's participation was unexpected, as little is known about him. His tone is polite, but there is a hint of mockery in it. Then Carrick asks directly if Urin really uses magic. Urin maintains his composure and calmly replies that he cannot go into details, but he is not exactly a mage. Carrick smirks at this answer and slowly nods before continuing on his way. Seeing the expression on this man's face, Urin narrows his eyes. Urin thinks to himself, becoming increasingly suspicious of Carrick's true intentions. After a short while, Carrick stops and announces that they have arrived. Urin looks around in confusion. It is not a classroom or a reception area, but an open training ground filled with sparring students. Before he has a chance to ask anything, A tall student with purple hair approaches and greets Carrick, asking if he has finally returned. Carrick nods and immediately asks the student where Colin Rocks is. The guy with purple hair blinks and reminds Carrick that he himself had just walked Colin to the professor a few minutes ago. Hearing this, Urim feels a surge of irritation. What's wrong with this guy? He thinks, realizing that Carrick brought him here for no reason. First, he pretends to take Urim to Colin. Then, under a false pretext, brings him to the training field. Before Urim has a chance to ask a question, the student with purple hair notices him and asks curiously who he is. Carrick turns to him and with a slight smile, introduces Urim as Colin's older brother, the same Urim Rocks who defeated the orc warrior along with Ilya. The boy looks impressed, but Carrick quickly interrupts him, adding that Urim just confirmed that he is not a mage, and therefore must rely solely on his physical abilities, just like them. Urim immediately understands what Carrick is trying to do. He's trying to provoke him, likely planning to humiliate him in front of his friends. Carrick continues with a sly grin, noting that he has also heard that Urim fights using daggers, iron balls, and even mechanical butterflies, an unusual combination for a nobleman. Then, pretending to be friendly, he offers Urim to show off his skills, as everyone here is curious to see how the steel mage fights without magic. Urim clenches his jaw, but ultimately agrees, deciding to go with the flow and teach them a lesson instead. Carrick then calls over one of his companions, a black-haired student named Malai, who Carrick says is an average student among the Academy's students. The implication is clear. Carrick expects Urim to lose to someone ordinary, since he uses a throwing weapon. Urim walks up to the weapons rack and calmly picks up a wooden sword. Seeing this, Carrick raises an eyebrow and mockingly asks why he uses a sword instead of his usual daggers. Urim calmly replies that since this is not a real fight, a wooden sword will do just fine. Carrick chuckles arrogantly and says that he heard that Urim can't wield a sword, so it will be interesting to see how he handles it. Urim exhales slowly, reading the smug looks on the faces of those around him. It's obvious to him that these noble elites have been looking down on him ever since, when they heard he uses unconventional weapons, like daggers. But Urim simply grips his sword tighter, his gaze cold and focused. Let them underestimate me, he thinks. Their surprise will be all the greater. Now Urim decides it's time to test the full potential of his heavenly martial body. The students quickly prepare the arena, and the duel begins. Urim's first opponent, Malai, he arrogantly assumes a stance and smirks, inviting Urim to make the first move. Urim nods calmly and accepts the offer, clutching the wooden sword with one hand. He steps forward and swings slowly, almost lazily. Malai, seeing this sluggish movement, snorts to himself. To him, it looks like an amateur's attack. Slow, predictable, and easy to block. He confidently raises his sword to defend himself, but at the moment their weapons touch, a thunderous blow echoes across the field. The sheer force of Urim's punch is overwhelming, and before Malai knows it, he's hit in the face. The students fall silent in shock and look forward, and they were shocked to see the main character and his opponent lying on the ground from the first weak blow. Carrick's confident grin faltered, and his eyes widened in disbelief before he let out an awkward laugh and said, "Ah, he must have gotten too comfortable." He forces a smile to hide his anxiety. Trying to maintain his composure, he apologizes to Urim and suggests another match. This time, he calls upon a stronger student, Rula, who is known as a mid-level and above fighter among the trainees. Carrick warns him not to underestimate the enemy, as Malai did. Rula, clearly arrogant, chuckles and tells him not to worry, rolling his shoulders and confidently assuming a stance. When Carrick gives the signal for the match to begin, Rula immediately rushes forward, attacking at full speed. But for Urim, everything seems to be moving in slow motion. Thanks to the heavenly martial body, his senses, reflexes, and perception were enhanced far beyond human capabilities. In one smooth motion, Urim swings his sword. Before Rula's attack can even reach its target, Urim's blow catches up with him. Rula barely manages to block, but the enormous force behind Urim's swing sends a shockwave through his arms. As before, the recoil causes Rula's own sword to slam into his forehead. Carrick's forced smile disappears completely, replaced by genuine shock. After all, the second fighter also falls to the ground, unconscious after the first blow with a wooden sword. Urin lowers his sword and mutters calmly, "Is this really the standard of your academy? Do you only raise weaklings here?" Carrick's jaw clenches, his pride as a nobleman and a student at an elite academy wounded. Containing his anger, he apologizes again, but insists on one last match, this time against himself. He declares that, as the strongest among them, he will personally test Urin's strength. Urin's eyes narrow slightly, his voice cold as he says that he will do everything as he wishes. Students gather in anticipation of their duel. When the match starts, the aura immediately spills out from the bastard's body. The protagonist looks at him in shock. His opponents before were just mice in front of this monster. Carrick immediately takes off. The crowd gasps in admiration as Carrick uses a high-speed technique that makes it appear as if multiple copies of himself are attacking from all sides. But for Urin, these illusions are meaningless. His heightened senses allow him to see right through everything. Every movement, every feint, every deceptive maneuver. Urin perceives all of this clearly. When Carrick lunges to strike, Urin turns his head and sees him clearly. And then the main character tilts his head slightly, easily dodging the bastard's blow. And the attacker clenches his teeth in anger. And Urina swings her sword with the same movement. The blow hits Carrick in the forehead before he can react. The blow is fast and powerful. Another micro-explosion, and Carrick falls to the ground defeated, like the rest. The students look at Urin with distrust and awe, whispering among themselves. Soon another man arrived, asking what was going on. To everyone's surprise, it turned out to be Urin's brother, Colin. Colin looked around and demanded to know what was going on, and then looks at the skinny guy with the wooden sword and asks, "Who is he?" Urin thinks to himself, "So this guy is my brother, who is known as a sword genius? An exceptionally skilled and talented swordsman?" The purple-haired boy tells Colin that Urin is his older brother who came to see him. Colin looks very confused and asks where Urin is. The purple-haired one is also confused, pointing directly at Urin and saying that he is right here. Colin thinks it's a joke and asks if Urin really looks like that, commenting that it can't be the same Urin he knows. Colin looks at it carefully, looking surprised and a little alarmed. He remembers what the guy looked like before and sees the body that stands in front of him now, asking how the hell such a change had happened. He was a pig. Urin calmly replies that he simply lost a little weight, but Colin is stunned. Not only has Urin lost weight, he even seems taller than before. Urin casually says that when he lost weight, he also grew taller. Colin then notices several students lying unconscious on the ground and asks why they are in that state. The purple-haired man immediately explains the situation to him in a whisper in his ear. And after hearing everything, Colin can hardly believe it. He points to Urin and asks if this means that even the story about the capture of the orc warrior is true. Urin confirms that this is indeed the case. Colin is overwhelmed with emotion, but Urin suddenly becomes stern, asking how Colin dared insult his older brother. Colin screams that he just can't believe the change. He can't believe that Urin has become so strong. Urin asks if his younger brother Colin plans to go all out against him. This angers Colin even more, and he states that he never truly considered Urin his older brother. He says that Urin's only advantage over him is that he was born 2 years earlier. This enrages Urin. He steps forward, determined to show Colin why he's the older brother, and challenges him. Colin laughs, saying that's exactly what he wanted. But Urin interrupts him, offering to make a bet. Urin suggests that the loser grant the winner one wish. Colin hesitates, but eventually agrees. Colin then tells Urin to get ready, and asks one of his classmates to hand him a wooden sword. The purple-haired man whispers something to Colin again, and seeing this, Urin smiles, thinking that he was probably explaining how Urin had defeated those 3 students earlier. And as soon as the fight begins, Colin immediately releases his aura, revealing his full power. Urin mentally praises him, realizing that Colin does not relax and fight seriously from the very beginning. Colin possesses level 2 Swift Sword, level 2 Swift Movement, and the Sword Emperor trait. However, His favorability towards Urim is at -78, indicating extreme hostility. Colin was born with the Sword Emperor trait, giving him a natural gift for swordsmanship. Colin lunges at Urim, and seeing this, Urim quickly assesses his options. No matter how you look at it, Urim doesn't think he'll lose. Using his dragon's small stride, Urim easily dodges Colin's attack and counterattacks with a slight smirk on his face and a lightning-fast aura around his sword and body. Instead of ending the match with one punch like he did with the others, Urim decides to teach Colin a lesson through a lengthy sparring match. The intense workout lasts 10 minutes. Colin continues to take hits from Urim as the surrounding students watch in awe and disbelief at Urim's strength. The main character hits his worthless brother on the neck, and then on his lower back and other parts of his body. His clothes are super dirty. The soldiers continued to watch, shocked by the incredible cruelty of the main character. Eventually, Colin admits defeat and asks to leave him alone. But since he still speaks informally, Urim gives him 1 or 2 or 3 more light blows, causing Colin to burst into tears and beg for it to stop. Urim points his sword at Colin, warning him that if he gets insolent again, the next lesson will be twice as harsh. Colin resigns himself and stands up quietly. And when he begins to finally get up, the guy says that now the time has come for his promised wish. Urim then instructs him that from now on, whenever Colin is with him, he is to call him Great Big Brother. Colin is shocked, saying that this might be too much, but Urim lifts his sword slightly, asking if Colin would like to refuse. A frightened Colin quickly agrees and calls Urim Great Big Brother. After this, Urim tells Colin that they are leaving. Confused, Colin asks where they are going, and Urim explains that they are heading to the Empire, where their younger brother Rayon is. After some time, they arrive at the capital of the Empire through the Warp Tower. Urinox is amazed again, transported to another country through the Magic Tower. Urim explains that the Magic Tower is a neutral organization that exists in every country. The architecture around seems almost modern, showcasing the Empire's grand design. They soon reach the Imperial Knight Academy. Standing there, Urim tells Colin to go and get Rayon. Colin agrees, but simply says yes, prompting Urim to smirk and remind him of his title, which causes Colin to quickly correct himself and say, "Yes, Great Big Brother." A short time later, Colin returns with their younger brother, Rayon. Urim waves at him, surprised at how tall he has become. The district asks if it is really Urim, and Urim confirms this with a smile, praising Colin for a job well done. Colin nods meekly, replying that it's nothing, Great Big Brother. The district begins to speak. The district informs Urim of the situation he heard from Colin. Upon hearing the news, Urim even finds it convenient, because now he won't have to explain everything in detail, and they can quickly go home. However, Rayon interrupts him and mentions a significant problem. Intrigued, Urim asks what it is. The district explains that a state of emergency has been declared in the imperial capital. They are allowed to enter the capital, but they cannot leave. The reason, Rayon adds, is that the crown prince of the empire was assassinated yesterday at dawn. Urim is extremely shocked to hear this, and is momentarily lost in thought. Colin is also stunned by the news about the crown prince. Urim quietly wonders if this is the incident he knew would happen. Colin confirms that everything is exactly as Urim described, and explains in more detail. At dawn, the crown prince was killed, causing the entire imperial capital to be locked down. Urim glances around at the soldiers patrolling nearby, trying to figure out what to do next. Colin, still confused, asks Rayon if this situation even makes sense. Urim recalls that on his way to the Knight Academy, he saw soldiers stationed everywhere, and the atmosphere throughout the city was unusually tense. Colin continues, adding that although he only heard it as a rumor, it could be important. He says that the crown prince's fiancée, a princess from another country, was visiting the capital for several days. Since the crown prince wanted to proudly show off the results of his training, he invited the princess to the training ground early in the morning, demonstrating his swordsmanship in front of her. And as soon as he finished his performance and approached the applauding princess, a sharp stone pillar suddenly burst out of the ground and instantly struck the crown prince. The priests who were nearby desperately tried to save him, but the crown prince had already died due to the sudden attack. Upon hearing the explanation, Colin immediately notes that it must be magic, as magic can be used freely within the imperial and royal palaces. Rayon agrees, adding that this is precisely why all the masters of the magic tower were urgently summoned to the palace. The situation has descended into complete chaos. Colin is deeply shocked, saying he could never have imagined that the crown prince would lose his life in the courtyard of his own palace, and worse, right in front of his fiancée. He wonders what exactly is going on. Urim, however, becomes confident in his guess after the mention of the stone spear. He now believes he knows the true culprit, the motive for the attack, and the assassin's current location. The organization responsible for the attack is known to have sprung up across the continent, beginning with events like the assassination of the crown prince. But in Urim's memory, this incident should have happened much later in the original story. Confused, Urim wonders what's going on. Something's wrong, as if the timeline of events has been distorted and shifted much earlier than expected. At the very least, Urim believes there should have been enough time for both he and the original protagonist to grow stronger before this event occurred. However, he wonders how much can change now that he has a heavenly martial arts body. Having thought everything over, Urim calls his brothers, and they respectfully answer him. Colin nervously addresses him as Great Big Brother, prompting Rayon to ask why Colin keeps adding that title. Confused, Colin becomes upset and tells Rayon not to ask. Urim then asks Rayon about famous hotels in the city. The district explains that Dragon's Tears and Giant's Oath are considered the best in the city. Urim responds that the Dragon Tears sound good, so he instructs Rayon to first apply for leave and then visit the Magic Tower to process the leave applications for all 4 of them. He also tells Rayon to provide the Rox family's name so the request can be processed more quickly. Afterward, Urim tells them to wait in Dragon's Tears until the results arrive. The district agrees, but then asks what Urim will do during this time. Urim starts to leave and replies that he is going to meet an old friend whom he has not seen for a long time. Before leaving, Urim waves his hand and tells both of his brothers not to hurt Urinox. Rayon is shocked to learn that Urim actually has friends in the Empire, and Colin also admits that he had no idea about it. Later, when night falls, Urim finally reaches the place he was going to. It's called Flamberge, a restaurant that only nobles are allowed to enter. In the dimly lit alleys, Urim first decides to change into clothes, which he had prepared in advance, making sure that his appearance was completely different. Having finished changing, he quietly calls out to Agnes. Agnes answers in an irritated tone, clearly upset that Urim had disturbed her sleep. Realizing that Agnes was resting, Urim apologizes and politely asks her to disguise his face. Agnes is shocked and demands to know how Urim discovered that she had such an ability. Nervously, Urim replies that he simply had a feeling that Agnes was capable of something like that. Agnes looks at him suspiciously, asking who exactly Urim is, and then wondering who he wants to disguise himself as. Urim glances at the entrance to the restaurant and asks Agnes to wait a minute. He notices an old man leaving a restaurant and asks if Agnes can copy the face of this particular man. Agnes agrees and begins to summon a secondary body in liquid form, slowly applying it to Urim's face. Urim just needs to concentrate and imagine the appearance he wants. After he clearly imagined her, Urim's facial features shifted and transform until he looks identical to the old man. Having completed his disguise, Urim returns to the restaurant. The guard at the entrance notices him and immediately recognizes him as Viscount Vera. The guard politely asks if the Viscount is back again. Maintaining his disguise, Urim, now appearing as Viscount Vera, says that he has decided to stay here a little longer. The guard, not sensing anything unusual, respectfully allows him to enter. Inside the restaurant, even the waiters notice Viscount Vera's new arrival. Taking a seat, Urim straightens his cap and casually agrees with the waiter, asking for a repeat of his previous order. The waiter goes off to cook, leaving Urim relieved that his penetration went smoothly. Now he only needs to focus his inner energy to strengthen his hearing. Urim concentrates and begins to listen carefully to the short conversations happening throughout the restaurant, hoping to gather useful information. A moment later, he finally hears the voice of the person he's been looking for. The woman he's looking for is talking to someone, crying about a recent confession. Using sound, Yurin easily determines her location. She sits on a chair, talking to the waiter with tears in her eyes. The waiter gently tries to console her, saying that people often say that old love can be forgotten with new love. She asks if this could be true, and the waiter assures her that she will definitely meet someone nice. His comforting words seem to ease her sadness, and she begins to feel a little better. Listening to their conversation, Yurin decides to contact her via audio transmission and quietly calls her name Envy. She flinches at the sudden voice. The guy asks her, "It was she who beat the crown prince, wasn't it?" The girl angrily demands to know who is speaking, asking if anyone called her. Then, filled with anger, she suddenly turns around and screams, cursing. The next moment, the entire restaurant building collapses, sending shockwaves of chaos throughout the area and throwing all visitors into panic. The building collapses completely. Concrete blocks fall to the ground, and something else falls with them. Yurin falls to the ground, frightened because he could never have imagined that she would lose control with such force. Envy unleashes her magic, desperately searching for the person who spoke to her earlier. Yurin becomes even more worried when she sees her status bar. Her destructive power is incredibly high, and her traits include the 7 deadly sins, envy, and even her affection for Yurin is at -99, essentially representing pure hostility. Envy finally notices Yurin, realizes he is human, and immediately decides that she will destroy him without hesitation. Despite knowing that he can't win, Yurin still feels the need to try, as this is what he came here for. Yurin already knew she wasn't human and possessed overwhelming strength, but now he wonders if he could even survive a fight with her. Determined to go all the way, Yurin decides to use Agnes to create a weapon, and by activating the ability, his disguise falls away, revealing his true face. Yurin then extracts the core and carefully reforges it into a dagger, hoping that it will give him even the slightest advantage in this impossible battle. Envy finds Yurin's true form incredibly captivating, and even remarks that he is quite handsome. Amused and intrigued, she decides that she would rather capture Yurin alive and make him her servant than simply defeat him. She jumps into the sky and rushes towards Yurin, scaring him so much that he instantly falls back to dodge the attack. Regaining his balance, he uses a straight strike skill and throws a dagger at Envy, but he bounces away from her as if nothing had happened, without leaving even a scratch. Since this tactic has clearly failed, Yurin immediately changes his strategy and uses the Dark Iron Burst skill to attack Envy. Although the attack hits the target, it has no effect on it. Envy becomes even more interested in Yurin after witnessing his unusual and creative magic. Starting to get more nervous, Yurin realizes that he has run out of practical options, and he has no choice but to use the same finishing move that once felled an orc warrior with one blow. He attacks Envy with Bloodfire Palm and Carving Shot, releasing a barrage of projectiles like butterflies that fly towards her. However, Envy effortlessly neutralizes them with her magic, shocking Yurin and making him painfully aware of how unequal the forces were. Yurin feels completely exhausted and looks back in despair, trying to figure out his next move. He notices people running for their lives after the sudden appearance of such a terrifying monster, and in order to prevent further casualties, he realizes that he must restrain Envy until the Capitol Guard arrives. Envy gets annoyed and attacks Yurin again, and he barely manages to dodge in time. By retreating, he finds himself in an even more dangerous position, and he is filled with anxiety. He knows that if he continues to dodge like this, he will eventually be defeated. It will be the end. He will simply not survive if he doesn't come up with something else to do. Having no better option, Yurin decides to use the sword, even though he has not yet fully mastered it. He grabs the blade and, instead of relying on a hidden weapon, channels his internal energy directly into it. Envy lunges at him again, but this time, Yurin successfully evades again, and finally uses the sword to cut through one of her stone spears. This small victory gives him a glimmer of hope, proving that, although difficult, stone spears can indeed be broken. Urin smiles, believing that there is still a chance of winning. Envy complains that Urin is surprisingly fun to fight and wonders how long he can keep up with her before attacking him again with its huge stone claws. Urin becomes increasingly frustrated as the number of stone spears increases, but he still has a few techniques up his sleeve. She asks if the main character will be able to reflect this too, but suddenly, Envy feels a tightness in her chest and finds her body unable to move. It turns out Urin has been secretly poisoning her throughout the battle. He used the prolonged poison, which causes intense internal pain. The snake mind poison from the blood poison art, which is infused with the venom of 100 vipers, and the fire poison, made from the toxin of the fire frog, which creates a burning agony throughout the entire body. Urin finally gets a reaction, and Envy's body is paralyzed, albeit only for a brief second. Urin is nervous, wondering why the period of paralysis is so short, but even so, he knows he can't miss this opportunity. Using the Lesser Dragon's treasure trait to greatly increase his speed, Urin leaps into the air to attack her. As soon as the paralysis ends, Urin delivers a clean and powerful blow and pours every drop of his inner strength into the black iron burst through the gap that has opened. Envy fails to dodge the blow, which causes a powerful explosion, detonating like a mini atomic bomb, throwing Urin back to the ground. He feels relieved, sincerely believing that he finally defeated her. Only scraps remained, until he sees her body regenerate again. Urin is stunned and horrified when Envy is fully restored. Envy, now furious, announces that he will end the fucking kid's life. Urin realizes that he completely forgot that these monsters have several phases before they actually die, and Envy is now entering her second phase. Moreover, with each phase, their strength and magical power increase dramatically. Envy looks at Urin with keen curiosity and attacks him, shouting for him to fall. Urin barely dodges by a hair, but her speed and unpredictability increased far beyond what he had encountered before. He tries his best to fight back with his sword, but deep down he knows that if things continue like this, he won't survive long. One of Envy's stone-based attacks narrowly misses him. Urin narrowly avoids the fatal blow, although it still grazes his shoulder. He immediately retreats, jumping away from the girl's stone tentacles, realizing that if he had reacted even a moment later, the outcome would have been catastrophic. Turning around, Urin decides to run, knowing that one single mistake now will cost him everything. Seeing Urin attempt to escape, Envy becomes even more furious. She blocks his way and coldly asks where he is going. She begins another merciless assault, and Urin dodges again and again, barely managing to save his body from being impaled on the tentacles like meat on a skewer. Envy finds the situation amusing and smiles, confidently declaring that Urina will never escape from her so easily, and all that is left for him is to flounder in agony, trying to escape. At this moment, Urin realizes how hopeless his situation has become. The scene then moves to another part of the city, where a woman in a cloak walks through the streets. She overhears people whispering anxiously about a monster that has appeared in the area, and that the guards need to be called immediately. A man runs in, begging for help and reporting that a creature covered in stone spears has appeared in the southern region. The woman silently listens to all these screams and quickly concludes that it is Envy we are talking about. Locals question whether the report is accurate, doubting whether it really is a monster made of stone spears. The man confirms this, and upon hearing this, the woman instantly disappears. The villagers begin to suspect that this stone monster may be the very one responsible for the crown prince's death. Soon, a woman appears on the hill, looking out for Envy's location. She notices a strange light in the distance, and having confirmed the direction, quickly moves towards it. She jumps off and moves on, and at that moment, we notice some interesting tattoos on her leg. Meanwhile, Urin stands his ground against Envy, clutching his sword as she prepares to finish him off once and for all. When her attack hits him, Urin freezes in shock, convinced that this is the end. He opened his mouth in fear and realized that it looked like he was going to die like this. Just before the blow reaches him, a system window appears, informing Urim that he is experiencing a true life or death crisis. As a result, 2 new special perks are unlocked. The first perk, Celestial Eye, is upgraded to Creator's Gaze and raised to the 2nd level. With this ability, Urim can now clearly see the trajectories of enemy attacks. He is stunned as Envy's predicted strike paths are simulated directly in his mind. Knowing exactly where each strike will land, Urim begins to dodge each attack with ease. If he can read the predicted paths, evasion no longer seems impossible. Not only does he avoid attacks, but he now does so with minimal movement. Urim smiles to himself, thinking that if he masters this ability, he will one day be able to dodge attacks effortlessly, like a true martial artist. Envy grows increasingly frustrated and furious as she watches Urim so easily avoid her attacks. She angrily demands to know how he does it. At the same time, the system explains the second privilege, the Ascension Realm, a temporary state that activates just before death and remains open only for a limited time. Suddenly, Urim's sword begins to glow with a blinding white aura. He feels his inner strength reach its peak as white energy gathers around the blade. Unsure whether it's the sword's aura or the sword's chi, Urim is certain of one thing. This power gives him a real chance of victory. Nearby, a woman and her child watch the battle from their home. The child excitedly tells his mother to look, claiming that the Night of Light has appeared. Envy attacks again with her tentacles, but this time, Urim easily breaks through her blows. The protagonist resolutely steps forward and cuts through its tentacles. He jumps into the air and delivers blow after blow, finally leaving Envy in shock. Now he raises his sword high above the monster's head and prepares to deliver the finishing blow. And with a scream, he breaks through the body with his sword, leaving a huge cut in the monster girl's flesh. A shining light spreads across the battlefield, filling everything around with brilliance. The child and mother rejoice, happily announcing that the Night of Light has defeated the monster. After the battle, Urim is completely exhausted and wonders if he really managed to defeat Envy. The system informs him that his internal energy and stamina are completely depleted. He barely survived, thanks only to 2 perks that activated at the very last moment. Knowing he can't stay, Urim tries to leave before the guards arrive, forcing himself to move, using every ounce of strength he has left. Suddenly, Urim feels something is wrong and turns around with horror in his eyes, only to see Envy recover again, but this time at an alarming rate. The system warns him that Envy has entered her 3rd phase, her final form. Horror grips Urim as Envy smirks and declares that she won't let him escape, realizing how dire the situation has become. Urim feels completely crushed and bitterly thinks that he didn't even have time to thank one person. Envy, who has entered the 3rd and final phase, consumed with rage and determined to end Urim's life. She unleashes her stone spears, this time much larger than in previous phases, emitting overwhelming pressure. Urim wonders if this is really his end, as his internal energy was completely drained by the previous battle. Just when Envy's attack was aimed straight at the protagonist's face, and it was about to hit the target, she suddenly freezes. Not of her own free will, Envy turns around in shock and doesn't understand what happened. It turns out that someone else is holding her back. The one holding her is none other than the woman Urim saw earlier, the one who quietly listened to the townspeople's conversations. Holding Envy, the woman lands gracefully on the ground, and it quickly becomes clear that Envy recognizes her. Envy tries to get her attention to the situation, urging her to look at what is happening, but the woman firmly orders Envy to stop, stating that now is not the time for them to reveal themselves. Not only Envy, but also Urim realizes who this woman is. The woman then jumps onto a nearby building, taking Envy with her, while Envy continues to question whether she really intends to ignore the scene below. This woman is the same one Urim and Girinox encountered when they descended from the Divine Dragon Palace. She is one of the 7 deadly sins. Urim says her name out loud, realizing that they are leaving because the white-haired girl has decided that the time for the 7 deadly sins to appear has not yet come. Without paying any attention to Urim, the gray-haired girl decides to leave and takes Envy with him on a leash. Urim feels a deep sense of relief, knowing that, despite everything, he is still alive. After the silver-haired girl and Envy completely disappear into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Urin notices city guards rushing to the scene to deal with the reported monster. Seeing this, Urin decides that it is better to leave, since a clash with the guards will only create unnecessary problems. He carefully avoids them and makes his way through the back streets, heading towards his hotel. By the next morning, Urin finally returns to the inn, where he is met by Girinox. Having settled in, Urin asks if anything unusual has happened in his absence. He then inquires about Colin and Leon, wondering if they are still asleep. Girinox reports that a dangerous individual appeared in the city last night, and as a result, Colin and Leon rushed off at dawn, declaring that they intended to catch the criminal. Urin takes off his coat, thinking that such excitement is typical for people their age. But then he says that he is happy. Everything seems to be fine, and for now, he will go about his business, and then collapses onto the bed, deciding to get a good night's sleep due to extreme exhaustion. Girinox smiles and tells Urin that he will be outside, and that Urin can call him if he needs anything. However, Urin falls asleep before Girinox finishes his sentence. Although the battle with Envy was extremely intense, it allowed Urin to reach the 4-star stage of the 10,000 poison body scripture. At the same time, Urin comes to a sobering realization of his own shortcomings, as he was unable to properly defeat Envy, who is considered the weakest of the 7 deadly sins. It is not yet time for the 7 deadly sins to act, but when that moment finally comes, sins far more terrifying than envy will emerge, along with other hidden and dangerous forces. Because of this, Urin wakes up and begins to meditate, determined to become stronger and improve faster than ever before. Later that day, Urin sits with his brothers, Colin and Leon. The district mentions rumors circulating in the city about an assassin who appeared last night and was allegedly responsible for the death of the crown prince. Colin clicks his tongue in frustration, saying that if he had encountered the criminal, he would have certainly caught him. The district continues with its judgment, explaining that the enemy was clearly not of their level, judging by the severe damage to the surrounding buildings. Leon adds that the killer was rumored to be a being beyond human capabilities, with stone spears erupting from its entire body and destroying buildings. It all sounded incredible, but according to the stories, another figure suddenly appeared, someone with a sword. Confused, Colin asks about this mysterious man. Leon turns to Urin, explaining that witnesses witnessed the appearance of the Knight of Light, a warrior wielding a radiant aura of light. They say he drew light from his sword, struck a monster with the shining blade, and even caused a powerful explosion. Eventually, the monster escaped, and the Knight of Light also vanished without a trace. Colin praises the story, calling it incredible, and jokingly says he wants such a title someday. He then wonders out loud who the Knight of Light really was, unaware that Urin is that very knight. Yawning slightly, Urin changes the subject and asks about the results of the application for exit. The district says it was approved this morning, adding that using the Rex name has proven very effective. Hearing this, Urin decides not to waste time and insists on leaving immediately, reasoning that if another incident occurs, they may not get out safely. Urin stands up and tells Colin and Rayon to pack their things and meet him in the lobby. They agree, though Rayon curiously asks why Urin looks so exhausted. The scene immediately shifts to a tower in the city center. Then the same transfer occurs, with lightning striking the building, and now they find themselves in their home square. After meeting and returning to the marquee, their father greets them warmly. The sight of his sons gathered together again fills him with happiness. Rayon notices his father and runs towards him. Hugging him tightly, the Marquis laughs heartily and notices that Rayon has grown up. Urin informs the Marquis that he has brought his sons back safely, and Colin also greets him respectfully. The Marquis welcomes them home and then asks about the incident that happened in the Empire. The district confirms that something happened and asks if he should explain the details. But the father laughs and tells them to rest first, reminding them that they must be tired from the journey. He suggests discussing everything properly later over dinner. That afternoon, Urin is resting in his room when Erin comes to greet him. She compliments him, saying that despite his short absence, he has returned with 2 new titles and is noticeably stronger. Urin, confused, asks what she means. Erin explains that in Aussie Castle, Urin earned the title of Iron Mage, and in the royal capital, he was awarded the title of Rookie Killer. Urim knows about the first title, but is completely unfamiliar with the second. When Eren asks if he really didn't know, she explains that at the Royal Knight Academy, Urim defeated 4 masterclass students. Hearing this, Urim recalls the incident and admits that he did indeed defeat them. Eren continues, explaining that those students were considered rising talents known as rookies, and since Urim defeated them all, people began calling him the Rookie Killer. Urim is shocked that they were considered newcomers, while Eren is puzzled by his reaction. Changing the subject, Urim tells Eren that he brought gifts for both her and Clyde, and says he will give them to her tomorrow. As he speaks, Peru arrives to deliver a message, informing Urim that the Marquis is calling all his sons to dinner. Hearing this, Urim also heads to the dining hall. When everyone is seated at the table, the Marquis asks if they had a good rest, and everyone confirms that they did. The Marquis then announces that before serving the dishes, he wishes to explain the reason why he has brought them together. With a serious expression on his face, he announces that the test to determine the successor will soon begin. As they all already know, the Rex family is a house in which the title is traditionally inherited by the eldest son. Under normal circumstances, Urim would have become the successor, and the Marquis himself inherited the position at an even younger age than Urim is now. However, Urim had wasted too many precious years, and because of this, the Marquis had originally intended to choose Colin as the next heir. At this point, Urim finally came to his senses. For this reason, the Marquis decided that he would no longer make decisions alone. Instead, his sons must prove by their actions who is truly worthy of becoming the heir. The atmosphere in the room becomes tense when Urim asks the Marquis, how does he plan to choose a successor? How will the trials even take place? The Marquis stands up and explains that, since there is no clear precedent for such a situation, he intends to divide the process into several stages. The first stage will be territorial defense. As they already know, the time is approaching when the adult monsters will begin moving toward the coastline. If these threats are not quickly addressed, the people living on their lands will suffer severe losses. In other words, the first test is to defend the territory. All 3 brothers will be assigned to different combat zones, where they must demonstrate their full capabilities. For evaluation, the Marquis will appoint 3 stewards, 1 for each son, who will observe the situation and report objectively. In addition to this, for this test, the Marquis allows them to use everything at their disposal. Urim asks for clarification, asking if they can really use whatever they want. The Marquis confirms this and explains that they can rely on their personal strength, the forces they have gathered, their connections, their wealth, and any other resources available to them. Colin asks if such freedom is really allowed, and the Marquis replies that they are not competing to become knights, but to become a Marquis. Hearing this, Colin smiles, glancing at Urim, who does not notice the meaning behind this expression. The Marquis continues, stating that while strength is important, to the Marquis, there are qualities far more critical than simple brute force. If they have the opportunity, they may even borrow knights from other factions or families. Ultimately, what matters most is achieving the best results. Urim clearly understands the terms, as do Colin and Rayon. The Marquis then claps his hands, signaling the cook to bring the food. Deciding it was time for a snack, the Marquis explains that since his sons had finally returned home after such a long time, he personally ordered the preparation of the original Shirani soup, the recipe of which belongs to their family. Urim's face darkens as he looks at the soup, realizing he'll have to eat it again. The Marquis encourages everyone to eat well and says that the deployment will begin in a month, which means they must prepare with everything they have. The next day, Peru asks Urim if he is going to start preparing for the test. Hearing this, Urim casually asks if he needs to prepare for anything at all. Peru then reports that Urim's other brothers have already taken action. Colin, in particular, has taken significant steps, and it appears even the Livingston family is sending him support. Urim recalls that the Livingston family is Lady Kana's birth family, and it seems she has decided to place all her hopes on Colin. Urim tells Peru that the Marquis told them to achieve the best results. This means that whether they recruit an entire knightly order or face the monsters alone, what truly matters is eliminating as many threats as possible. Peru begins to sweat admitting that this logic makes sense. Urim smiles calmly and says that friends who will help him carry out a complete cleanup are already on the way. At this moment, Aaron and Clyde enter Urim's room, dressed in the uniform of Urim's personal nightly order, and stand before him. Urim tells them he has something for both of them. Starting with Clyde, Urim speaks of an ancient tradition whereby a lord gives a sword to his knights. Because of this tradition, Urim explains that he bought the sword especially for Clyde. Clyde accepts the weapon and thanks Urim, examining it carefully. Suddenly, the sword begins to glow with red mana. However, Clyde quickly realizes that, despite his fiery appearance, the blade doesn't emit any heat at all. And it doesn't burn him. Clyde asks about this in confusion, and Urim explains that mana is created by the flame spirit. Since Clyde knows little about such things, Urim doesn't go into further detail, and instead asks about the sword's weight. Clyde cheerfully replies that it's very light and comfortable to wield. Urim considers this an excellent sign, concluding that the sword has accepted Clyde as its master. As Aaron watches Clyde and the sword with obvious jealousy, Urim advises Clyde to talk to his sword more often, explaining that this will allow him to fully unleash its destructive power. This only makes Aaron more jealous. Noticing her reaction, Urim calls out to her and says that there is no need to be jealous, since her gift has also arrived. He then takes out another sword and hands it to her. The moment Aaron takes the sword, a stream of green wind gathers around him. Sensing the aura, Aaron immediately recognizes it as the Wind Spirit Sword. Urim confirms her observation. It is indeed the Wind Spirit Sword, and Aaron excitedly tells him that the sword says that he likes her. Urim is momentarily puzzled by this statement, but Aaron quickly apologizes and explains that he wants to try swinging it immediately, asking for permission to test it. Clyde also asks permission to try out his sword. Urim grants them both permission, which makes them extremely happy. Clyde enthusiastically invites Aaron to a duel, confidently declaring that he will win this time. Aaron simply smiles and replies that he still has a long way to go. They both quickly leave to test their new swords, while Urim and Peru watch from behind. Peru notes that he himself feels a certain envy. Hearing this, Urim turns to him and says that he will also get something good later. But before that, Urim still needs to pay off his debt. Peru is very happy to hear this. After some time, Urim puts all the money he has on the table in front of Peru. Seeing the enormous sum, Peru, shocked, asks what it means. Urim reminds him that he promised to repay the debt several times over. Peru replies that it is not just several times more, but several dozen times more. And then the guy asks, is he a gambling genius? Where did he get such riches? Urim then explains that he needs the money to buy the poisons he needs. Hearing this, Peru happily tells Urim to just call him when he needs help. Later that day, Urim comes to visit Girinox and asks how he is feeling and whether he is getting used to the new environment. Girinox smiles and confirms that thanks to Urim, everyone treats him very well. Urim tells Girinox that he's found suitable craftsmen for the two swords he bought from him. Girinox asks if he means the two-handed sword and the thin blade. Urim confirms this, explaining that both swords seem to have accepted their owners, adding that he will show them to Girinoxu later. Girinox expresses relief, admitting that he was afraid the swords might have been a failure. Urim smiles and reassures him, saying that they are not failures at all, but masterfully crafted blades that choose their owners, and praises them as incredible weapons. Maintaining modesty, Girinox thanks Urim for trusting someone he considers less than skilled. Urim is confused by this comment, but Girinox continues, saying that he has been thinking a lot and has something important to tell Urim. When Urim asks what exactly, Girinox explains that there is a serious problem in the Marquis's house. Urim is visibly shocked by what he heard from Girinox and immediately asks him to explain everything in detail. After hearing the full explanation, Urim goes straight to the Marquis and asks for permission, explaining that it is necessary if the Marquis truly wants to get to the bottom of the truth. However, the Marquis insists on finding out why the permit is needed, since such powers are not issued without reason. Hearing this, Urim suddenly turns to the Marquis as his father, which frightens him. Urim continues, saying that ever since Ilya defeated him, he doesn't believe he's ever disappointed the Marquis. He then sincerely asks the Marquis to trust him in this matter as well, and grant his permission. In return, Urim promises that the Marquis will not be disappointed. Touched by his words, the Marquis agrees to issue the permit, and tells Urim that he will notify the butlers so that Urim can pick him up the next day. However, he adds that the permit will only be valid for 24 hours. Urim expresses his gratitude, bows respectfully, and says that he is taking his leave. As Urim leaves, the Marquis watches him go and mutters to himself that his father's treatment makes him soft-hearted. However, he hopes that Urim won't cause any trouble, reassuring himself that the permit is only valid for 24 hours anyway. The next day, when Urim is about to leave, Peru informs him that several people with large boxes are waiting at the gates of the Marquis' estate and asking for him. Hearing this, Urim remarks that their timing is perfect, though his comment is barely understood by Pear. Urim then instructs Pear to tell all the male servants to collect the items at the entrance and carry them to Armory Number 1. Peru looks shocked and asks again, wanting to confirm whether Urim really means that all the things should be taken to the armory. Urim calmly confirms and adds that he still needs to bring something, so he will meet Peru in front of Armory Number 1. Still confused, Peru can only agree. Soon after, the butler meets Urim and hands him the permit that the Marquis promised to issue. Urim accepts him and asks about the current location of the Marquis. The butler explains that the Marquis is drinking tea in a private room with the Marchioness. Hearing this, Urim instructs the butler to tell the Marquis to bring the inspector to Armory Number 1 by noon. The butler, confused, asks why this is necessary, but Urim ignores the question and firmly states that if the message is not delivered, the butler will regret it. Then Urim heads to the armory, where the guards stop him at the entrance, declaring that outsiders are not allowed to enter. In response, Urim asks the guards if they see the boxes stacked nearby. The guards, puzzled, confirm what they see. Urim explains that the crates contain swords, shields, and armor he acquired from Assi Castle in preparation for the upcoming deployment. He tells them he needs to stow his gear inside and that they must open the doors immediately. The guards hesitate and reply that such questions require the presence of the quartermaster. Hearing this, Urim smiles and casually says that perhaps the quartermaster has already been called. The guards are amazed by his confidence. Then Urim looks into the distance and notices that the quartermaster must have instructed them to notify him if anything unusual happened in the armory. At that moment, a figure runs toward them. It is indeed the quartermaster. Clearly out of breath, the quartermaster runs up to Urim and demands to know what he thinks he's doing. Urim calmly explains that he bought weapons and armor for the upcoming campaign, and that the quartermaster simply needs to open the doors of the armory. The exhausted quartermaster apologizes and says that special permission is still required to access the armory. Hearing this, Urim responds with a slight smile, saying that's precisely why he prepared it in advance. Urim presents the permit and firmly orders the quartermaster to open the armory doors. The quartermaster looks both worried and irritated as he opens them, but he repeatedly begs Urim to just put the things inside and don't touch anything else. Then the servants begin carrying all the boxes into the armory. Afterwards, Urim tells Pear that since they're already here, they might as well inspect some weapons. He then orders Pear to take out one of the old crates stored inside the armory. Hearing this, the quartermaster is visibly shocked and quickly tells Urim that inspecting the weapons requires a separate, special permit. Urim calmly replies that he intends to look into only one drawer. After some hesitation, the quartermaster agrees and personally orders one box to be taken out. As soon as the old box is outside, Urim orders it to be opened and asks Giranox to examine the contents of the box. Giranox reports that most of the weapons inside appear to be in decent condition on the surface. Upon hearing this report, Urim turns to the quartermaster and compliments him, saying that he seemed to have managed the armory well. Urim even tells him that he'll mention this to the Marquis and recommend a reward. The quartermaster is clearly pleased with this praise. However, immediately afterward, Urim issues another order, ordering the guards to remove all the remaining boxes from the armory, leaving nothing inside. The quartermaster's expression instantly changed. He becomes extremely frightened and loudly protests, declaring that Urim has no right to take out everything, and that this is clearly beyond his authority. He insists that even if Urim is the heir, this is going too far. In response, Urim presses the permit forcefully to the quartermaster's face, sharply ordering him to stop talking about abuse of power. He clearly demonstrates the resolution and accuses the quartermaster of constant behind-the-scenes intrigues. At this moment, the Marquis and Kana arrive at the armory and witness a tense confrontation. By that time, the guards had already carried out all the boxes. The Marquis asks what's going on, and Urim explains that all the weapons were taken out of the armory so that the Marquis could personally get to the bottom of the truth. The Marquis begins to examine the weapon, and he quickly takes one of the swords, immediately noticing that the blade is extremely dull, to the point that it can hardly be called a sword. The Marquis turns to the inspector and demands an explanation, pointing out that the inspector had previously reported that during the audit last month, there were no problems in the armory. The inspector is horrified and immediately shifts all the blame onto the quartermaster, declaring that he must have substituted the supplies. Urim steps forward and tells the inspector to stop talking nonsense, explaining that it would be impossible to steal or replace such a huge amount of equipment in 1 month without someone deliberately turning a blind eye to it. Urim then uses his ability to apply pressure, making it difficult for the inspector to breathe. The inspector immediately apologizes and begs for mercy. The Marquis calls out Urim's name, and Urim responds by saying that the Marquis now understands why he needed permission and why he couldn't explain everything in advance. Urim goes on to reveal that the problems aren't limited to just this location, stating that Armory Number 2, Armory Number 3, and even the food warehouse are likely experiencing similar issues. Urim continues, explaining that even if they somehow manage to survive this year's deployment, there is no guarantee of safety in the years to come. He says that while enough weapons and food may be available in wartime, the real concern is the soldiers risking their lives on the front lines. If those in power do not perform their duties properly, the Marquis' soldiers will be forced to fight with useless weapons and consume supplies that are barely fit for consumption. Even Kina is shocked to hear this. Urim firmly states that he will never forgive anyone who is so careless with human lives, and that he will never show mercy to those who play with the safety and lives of others. Urim soon announces that the set-aside chest contains swords, armor, and shields purchased through his blacksmith from Aussie Castle, emphasizing that their quality is impeccable. He tells his father to throw out everything unusable and replace it with these supplies. Then his tone becomes harsher. With the utmost seriousness, he states that the uncovered corruption likely involves many more people than initially expected, and demands that everyone connected to the 2 exposed individuals be punished without exception. The Marquis looks at him with distrust, calling him by name and demanding to know what kind of man he has become. Urim bows his head in respect and calmly states that, in that case, he will leave. He turns and leaves, leaving the others speechless. As he leaves, he reflects that this is the limit of his intervention. Everything that happens next is in the Marquis' power. The rest is his father's responsibility. A few days later, returning to the estate, Urim receives a summons. He stands behind the Marquis and asks if he was summoned. Without turning around, the Marquis replies that thanks to Urim, the corruption was exposed, and he thought it right to explain how it ended. Urim immediately understands everything and quietly confirms it. The Marquis admits that Urim was right. He explains that not only the first armory, but also the others, as well as the food warehouses, are deeply mired in corruption. The number of people involved was staggering. What shocked him most weren't the ordinary soldiers or servants, but people he'd trusted for years, like the armory manager and the inspector. His voice tightens as he admits that people who served alongside him for more than a decade were involved, and that it truly broke his heart. Urim, with a sharp look, asks if everything was really installed. The Marquis replies that the manager and inspector confessed with unnatural honesty, even voluntarily giving up information they were not asked for, which made the investigation frighteningly easy. Urim listens without any reaction, mentally noting that the interrogation poison worked exactly as planned. The Marquis puts down his cup and says that this incident made him realize a lot. Straightening up, he recalls how, shortly after he became a Marquis, The former king publicly reprimanded him in front of many nobles, deeply humiliating him. He admits that Urin's words, spoken a few days ago, hurt even deeper, humiliating him even more. Still not turning around, he says that Urin told the truth, and even prepared a solution in advance. Urin hesitantly calls out to him, but the Marquis continues, declaring that he himself was a disappointment. Then, unexpectedly, he asks Urin for forgiveness. These words make Urin freeze. The Marquis turns to his seat and apologizes for being such a disgraceful father. Urin looks at him, stunned, his thoughts racing, then firmly answers that it is not so. The Marquis turns around in surprise. Urin smiles brightly and points to himself, explaining that he had been causing trouble for years before he finally came to his senses. He adds that everyone makes mistakes. The Marquis grits his teeth and mutters with a forced smile that Urin's tongue has finally surpassed his own. Urin easily replies that his father flatters him too much. Exhaling, the Marquis declares that he will never make the same mistake again. That same night, someone urgently calls Urin. Sealed containers are displayed in the room, and Urin announces that the poison has arrived. His system window appears, displaying details. A neurotoxin derived from steelhead mushrooms, causing paralysis and respiratory failure. Urin clutches the vial, a thrill running through him as he notes that aquatic monsters would have difficulty breathing on land. He loudly praises the result. Peru hesitates, then asks if Urin has heard the latest news. Urin turns sharply and demands clarification. Peru excitedly explains that Urin's popularity outside the estate has skyrocketed. Urin's anxiety grows. He asks what this popularity even means, insisting that it must be a misunderstanding. Peru continues, explaining that while he was producing the poison, he heard Urin's name everywhere. People were talking about him. When pressed, Peru recounts that the inhabitants of the territory were deeply touched by Urin's statement that he cared about the soldiers more than anyone except the Marquis. They were touched that he'd spent his own money to buy them armor and shields. Urin muttered worriedly that his reputation as a hooligan shouldn't be erased so easily. Peru adds that some townspeople are even trying to sign up as volunteers for Urin's detachment. He praises Urin as a genius and asks if he planned this from the beginning, stating that recruitment will now be effortless. Urin groans, clutching his head, waves Peru away, and tells him to leave. Peru bows, still amazed, and leaves. Left alone, Urin sighs and mentally admits that improving his reputation, this is a development he never expected. Putting it aside, he decides to develop more poison anyway. That same night, he begins. While he's consuming the flowers of the steel-capped mushroom, the poison, his system is bombarding him with notifications. The scripture of the body of 10,000 poisons absorbs it, unlocking a new trait, immunity to 100 poisons. Another message states that all pain and symptoms from poison are removed. This realization suddenly awakens him in the middle of his meditation. Sitting in the lotus position, he examines himself and realizes that consuming the poison no longer causes pain. It feels natural. He resumes his meditation, amazed at the power of this trait. By morning, a new system window appears. A new poison has been unlocked, the curse of the Hagen serpent. A neurotoxin capable of killing a rut, a legendary sea creature. Even a tiny amount can kill a human without leaving a trace. Urin looks at him with disbelief. He intended to unlock a weaker poison, but instead received an advanced one. As he dresses, he wonders whether the scripture has reached an intermediate level and whether stronger cultivation reveals stronger poisons. A smile slowly appears on the face. Peru arrives, and Urin hands him a list, ordering the immediate preparation of poisons. Peru agrees, but after reading the long list, he breaks out in a sweat. Urin confirms that this is intentional, musing that there is plenty of money, and with immunity to poisons, absorption requires no effort. He decides to raise the writing level to 5 stars before the campaign. Time passes. The departure ceremony begins. At the estate, Urin stands before the troops he has gathered. His brothers stand before their own forces. The difference is obvious. Peru whispers anxiously, asking if they'll really be okay. Urin asks what he means. Peru gestures to the massive nightly orders supporting the other heirs and notes that Urim only has Aaron and Clyde. He asks why Urim refused volunteers. Urim smirks and says he has a plan. There's a mocking laugh behind him. Colin and Leon are laughing openly. Anger flares, and Urim mutters that they need a lesson. Peru panics and begs him to restrain himself. Before the situation escalates, a loud announcement announces the arrival of the Marquis. The troops rise as the Marquis steps forward. The Marquis says that he will not speak for long, but will explain everything briefly, and they will get down to business. He announces that he will stand where the danger is greatest, leading from the front, and orders them to defend their land. A thunderous roar answers him. Watching this, Urim smiles faintly and thinks that it's all begun. The campaign is beginning. Each heir is assigned a defensive sector. 2 days later, Urim arrives at his post. At the castle gates, he orders them opened and introduces himself. A wallkeeper named Hans greets him, but falters when he sees a tiny detachment behind Urim. He hesitantly asks if that's really all. Urim tilts his head innocently and asks, "What's wrong?" Hans nervously explains that hundreds of Valacs attack every year, and that such a number cannot be contained with such a small force. Sweat breaks out on his face as he asks one last time if reinforcements will arrive. The manager gloomily explains that within a few days, the entire coast will be infested with sea monsters like Bollocks. He warns that their huge numbers could overwhelm the walls and gates if they attack together. He insists that the only option is to go beyond the walls and thin out their ranks beforehand. Then panics and blurts out that with only 5 knights, there is no way to stop them. The young gentleman remains silent, his expression unreadable, and he responds only with a long pause. Then he says there are fewer than 5. The young gentleman smiles calmly and points to the side, explaining that the man standing there is the Marquis's butler, sent to watch him, and his own butler. The red-haired servant lets out an awkward laugh. The young master then bluntly states that his only knights are the 2 behind him, Urim and Clyde, and adds that what matters is what happens next. He points directly at Clyde and says that Clyde can handle the battle alone, so there is nothing to worry about. Clyde winces and stutters in disbelief, asking if he heard correctly and how this is even possible. He wonders how he can handle this alone. The young gentleman steps forward and squeezes Clyde's shoulder hard, calling him by name and telling him to trust him. He declares that Clyde possesses dormant potential, and with dangerous confidence, proclaims that the power is there and will now be unleashed. He declares that the time has come to awaken the berserker within him. In the fortress, the young master calls Hans and asks for 2 training swords. On the shoreline below the walls, he lays out the schedule, stating that until the monsters arrive, Urim and Clyde will spar continuously throughout the day. He orders them to fight once, rest for an hour, then repeat, and asks if this is clear. He stops Urim briefly and says that he needs to ask her something before she starts. Urim obediently answers. He asks how sparring with Clyde usually goes. A moment later, she honestly admits that she wins, without much effort. The young gentleman's smile becomes sharper as he speaks. What does this mean? That she held back in the fight with him? Urim falls silent. He explains that until now, there was no reason to give it her all. But from this fight onwards, she must use 100% of her power and completely crush Clyde. Urim blurts out his surprise, but the young master continues, instructing her to beat him so hard that he feels the tear cut into his bones. He says it's okay, even if she beats him to a pulp, because that's how Clyde's potential will manifest. He tells her to trust him again. On the beach, Urim and Clyde stand facing each other with practice swords. Clyde roars for her to get ready and charges forward, aura raging around him. The young master mutters with slight surprise, wondering since when Clyde became so skilled in controlling his aura. Clyde attacks first, getting closer and closer to his opponent. Heat and pressure swirl around his swing. The girl meets him head on. The guy is shocked by her calmness and speed. Then at the last moment, the girl slips past the blow. Her blade flashes and she cuts cleanly down his side in a single line. Clyde chokes and wobbles, coughing as the blow sends him to one knee. Urim takes a deep breath as Clyde admits defeat in a broken voice. From the wall, a young gentleman watches with a drink in his hand and mutters that the sight gives him goosebumps. His gaze fixates on Urim, noting her absurdly high abilities. The status window confirms her features, and he realizes that her clear mirror, her calm water, have grown far beyond his expectations. He notices that she's not just fast, but can read sword trajectories and react instantly. It's like a child fighting an adult. The sparring continues. In the second bout, Urim strikes from below and twists Clyde's body with a brutal hit. The third match ends before he has time to recover. The fights pile up until the ninth. Clyde staggering again and again, reduced to pure defense. Next to the young master, the butler widens his eyes and comments that Urim is completely overwhelming him. The young gentleman doesn't answer. Below, Clyde is kneeling on the sand, shaking and breathing heavily. He looks at the ground, whispering in disbelief that the gap is really that huge. Someone shouts that Clyde has had enough for today. Clyde, shocked, blurts out to the young master whether this is even possible for him. He admits that he couldn't even touch the hem of her clothes and asks how the young master can claim to have hidden potential. The young gentleman snorts and says that he already told him. He is hidden. He asks sharply if Clyde expected him to show up easily, then orders him to trust and continue sparring. The guy, with tears in his eyes, says that he still has little faith in his gift. Time flies. The second day arrives, and Urim continues to crush Clyde with his effective strikes. The third day follows, her blade cutting into him again and again. After the repetitions, the young gentleman sits alone, cross-legged, breathing calmly. Suddenly, a soldier runs in and shouts that there is a serious problem. The young gentleman calmly asks what is the matter. The soldier blurts out that it has finally begun, and that the bullocks are rising. They rush to the wall. The soldier points to the sea, the water parts, and round-headed monsters float to the surface, flashing red eyes and bearing jagged teeth, rising in swarms. The young gentleman watches without panic and casually remarks that he hasn't seen them for a long time, even calling them cute little bolo boys. While the monsters are gathering, he asks where Clyde is. Urim hesitates, then explains that Clyde lost earlier and is still sitting on the beach. The young gentleman smiles with satisfaction and orders her to give him something. Clyde collapses forward on the sand, sobbing and shaking as despair consumes him. He admits to himself that he must be hopeless. Urim comes up and calls him by name. He responds weakly. She struggles to support the weight of what she is carrying and says that the sword is incredibly heavy. Clyde explains that the young master ordered Clyde to take him and adds that the bullocks are coming and that he must fight them. Clyde freezes in shock. When he looks up, the beach is already swarming with a massive wave of monsters. Urim adds that there's something else. She delivers the message exactly as instructed, instructing him to surrender his body to the flames, and then says that the young master told her to leave him there after that. Clyde cries out in disbelief, but Urim is already running away, shouting that she'll come back if it gets dangerous. Clyde reaches after her, panic breaking his voice. As he looks at the endless monsters, he exhales that it's too much, and wonders how he is supposed to win. High on the wall, the watchers tense up. One considers calling for reinforcements. Another wonders what Clyde will do. In the center of it all, the young gentleman stands motionless, his expression unreadable, his only silence. He says that Cloud's hour has come. And then all these piranha monsters rushed to the shore. The boy let out a hoarse groan, barely holding back curses. He was clearly struggling with pain or despair. The panic-stricken soldiers looked at each other in horror, not knowing what action to take. Only the main character stood calmly. Finally, he smiled and said it was time to act right now. A calm but commanding voice sounded, and Urim put his hand forward, commanding Cloud to submit completely to this mysterious power of flame and smoke. Recalling the content of the novel, the young man noted for himself the enormous hidden potential of the berserker trait. However, the main problem was the wearer's innate meekness, which almost completely blocked the manifestation of this power. Confused by what was happening, the man hastily adjusted his clothes, while the novel described a method for breaking these shackles. The first necessary condition for awakening was the encounter with an insurmountable obstacle and its subsequent overcoming. The next step was to face a far greater and more terrifying obstacle. It required plunging into the depths of utter despair, reaching a state of extreme grief and uncontrollable fear. The boy called the attack, realizing its deadly danger. The system identified the smoke as soul-destroying smoke level 2, creating a hallucinogenic zone, causing terror and panic. The piranhas kept running forward, and the smoke immediately filled the entire battlefield, coloring it blood orange. The piranhas immediately began to gurgle in shock, assessing the situation around them. The properties of the haze that had suddenly surged in began to change rapidly, causing Cloud's confusion. One of the subordinates, Arena, turning to the others, reminded them of the master's order to completely submit to the effects of the smoke. Her unexpected appearance instantly frightened the warrior. From Clyde's memories came his own childish cry, full of pain and a helpless appeal to his mother. Little Clyde screamed in horror at the sight of his mother suffering, which only earned him rude laughter and insults from his father. A mocking voice asked mockingly what the boy could do if he hit his mother right now. The aggressor cynically stated that the only answer to injustice was to become stronger, and continued to humiliate the child. The child's cry merged with sobbing and a desperate apology addressed to the mother. Through tears and pain, a childish oath was uttered, a promise to become stronger in the future. This promise sounded like a vow, to become strong in order to stand up for the person most dear to you. The adult voice in the memories spoke with disdain about this childish oath, asking again whether the weakling hoped to become stronger. The same voice sarcastically doubted that anything could grow out of such pathetic weakness. Immediately, the main character saw himself falling from another powerful blow. He was transported into the memories of his fights with Aaron. The girl emphasized that the boy could not even touch his clothes, let alone make a real threat. The cruel words sounded like a death sentence. The dream of strength was just an illusion, and he himself would forever remain a weakling. Urin's arrogant voice immediately appeared, addressing the now adult Clyde, who politely announced that he was revising his assessment. The true verdict was merciless. Clyde had no potential from start to finish. The final verdict was that Clyde was forever doomed to remain a pathetic weakling, which triggered his inner protest. From the depths of Clyde's soul, a furious cry of denial erupted, a cry that this verdict was a lie. An echo from the past reminded him of his own promise to become stronger to protect his mother. A mocking voice from his memory again called him a weakling, a windbag, doomed to eternal weakness. This time, Clyde fiercely and confidently rejected this destructive voice, refusing to give in. A key premise from the novel came to mind. The berserker awakens, plunging into an abyss of extreme sorrow and fear. One of his subordinates turned to Urin in alarm, trying to understand the nature of the mysterious smoke. And suddenly, in the abyss of smoke, there was a bright explosion of light. The knight spoke up again, full of confusion and demanding an urgent explanation of the situation. Urin's internal monologue noted that in the novel, Creed awakened only after the actual loss of loved ones. This is a success, and although the current method was artificial, the result necessary for awakening was successfully achieved. The guard asked why their knight was acting so strangely. Urin made a decision, thinking out loud about calling off soul-blighting smoke now, and then the silhouette of a piranha began to appear through it. And the rest of her friends, who were shocked, they are just fish. But when they saw Cloud, they gathered into a flock and began to gurgle even louder. The command followed to grab that very flame spiritual sword and use it. And Cloud immediately began to carry out the protagonist's order. He pounced on the piranhas, activating his fire sword in the air, and then he fired a volley of hellish fire at all the fish that were in front of him. The guard cried out in disbelief, unable to comprehend what was happening. Only the fact of a simultaneous attack on 5 huge bollocks was confirmed. Then Cloud got ready and gathered his strength, and then jumped up and began to swing his fire sword. And then he fell upon the fish with all his fiery power, and all the fish were immediately fried or even burned into dust. This affected every fish in the area. After all, Cloud was already spinning like a top, scattering his aura napalm all over the area. An impressed cry came from the observation post that he had dealt with them all single-handedly. Urin's calm voice reminded the doubters that this was exactly what he had said from the start. The young gentleman confidently confirmed that Clyde was indeed capable of fighting alone against everyone. It was noted that the bulk of the sea creatures had already been killed or had fled. Then Urin thought for a moment, remembering the existence of one potential problem. It became apparent that Clyde's mind had not returned to normal after the transformation. He suggested that the reason lay in the artificial nature of the awakening. He still saw in everyone the images that the smoke had forced upon him. The berserker's battle roar confirmed his worst fears. Now even his allies seemed like enemies to him. Urin gave the order to neutralize the berserker without causing him harm, but he himself doubted the simplicity of this task. Erin firmly stated that she would take matters into her own hands and will pacify Clyde personally, causing surprise among those around him. A reasonable question was asked whether the girl was confident in her abilities after demonstrating the power of a berserker. Erin noted that despite what happened to the knight, his basic skills and fighting style remained the same. Based on this, the girl concluded that she could neutralize him. The guy was shocked.